Arcane Exfil by Dr. Doritos, M.D. Chapter 11, Terms of Service. Have I ever mentioned how much I seriously hate, loathe, disdain meetings? Ethan grumbled as a guard led them through the halls. Well, shoot, don't reckon I've heard that one before. Miles didn't even blink at Ethan's little comment. Maybe the 100th time's the charm. In that case, have I ever mentioned... Miles cut him off with a smirk. Man, don't even start. Shit's gonna be annoying enough when we step inside. Cole couldn't blame the guy. A decade plus of briefings had taught him bureaucracy was bureaucracy, whether it came with stars, suits, or whatever passed for authority here. Of course, he always knew where he stood. The boundaries between agencies, the pecking order, the whole dance. The only difference between the various agencies and leaders was how asinine they got about operational support. Different agencies, same half-assed bullshit. Here's the target. Intel might be good or might get you killed. Figure it out yourself. And oh yeah, we can't give you the tools you actually need. At least here they'd burned resources just getting his team on the ground. Granted, Delta opened doors that stayed shut for everyone else, walking into a room with 3 different power structures, each with their own stake in how this played out. It wasn't anything new, but now they were heroes. What weight did that carry in a world desperate enough to summon them? Hopefully a few more privileges than what they were afforded back home. Probably won't be too bad. I mean, hey, they need us. They need us badly. I can tell, despite their offer of letting us play civvy, Cole said. Hell, the king wouldn't have shown up at our bedside otherwise. Fair enough, Miles said. The guard murmured something to his counterpart at the chamber doors. A moment later, they entered to the herald's announcement. Lieutenant Cole Mercer, Sergeant Miles Garrett, Sergeant Ethan Walker of the United States Army. The herald paused, then gestured toward the 4 men seated together on one side of the rectangular table in the center of the room. At the head, the Right Honorable Alric Varicet, Prime Minister of the Crown. To his right, Director General Cullen Fernal of the Office of Threat Assessment and Control, Sir Fotham Fallamore of the Office of Thaumaturgy, and General Aldam Galahad, Commander of His Majesty's Armed Forces. 3 different agencies at one table, 4, if the Crown counted, and not a hint of the usual territorial pissing. Who knew an existential threat could be such an effective antidote to bureaucratic infighting? Gentlemen, please take your seats, the Prime Minister greeted them. I dare say your first evening in Seldorn proved rather more eventful than intended, though they have rather thoroughly validated His Majesty's choice in summoning. The Crown now seeks to formalize your service to the kingdom. We have prepared articles of service befitting your role as slayers. The nature of your duties shall require proper accord between His Majesty's forces and the Office of Threat Assessment and Control. Alric gestured to a man standing quietly behind his chair, middle-aged, dressed in the understated but still fine clothing of a court official. Our interpreter, Vale, shall assist us with these proceedings. After the man introduced himself and swore an oath upon His Majesty's authority, Alric passed copies of the document to each of them. While your status as the Crown's chosen heroes affords certain privileges, I should articulate that it also carries obligation in equal measure. He paused, turning to a man in another brigandine piece, but with a light mesh overlay on top. A bit overkill for a meeting, but not really out of place considering the recent incident. More interesting was the fact that this guy looked almost as clean as the mustachioed general beside him, all except for one minor detail. Healing magic could get rid of scars, but apparently it couldn't get rid of the tired stare behind his facade of composure. The eyebags born of seeing shit no one should ever have to see. Director General Fernal, if you would? Cullen cleared his throat. Let's start with your compensation. 50 crowns monthly. Each he paused, likely hoping the number would impress them. Fat chance when they had no frame of reference. It didn't take the Director General long to read the room, though. More than some regional merchants see in a month. But then, we expect more than what merchants deliver. The fact that the man didn't say anything like local merchant or village merchant was telling enough. Definitely not East India Company levels of stacked, but regional merchants would still be running decent-sized operations between cities. Likely enough to live like whatever passed for multi-millionaires around here. Well, it was good to know they valued their demon hunters. Concerning to know just how much they thought they needed to, though. The rest of the package reflected that kind of commitment. Cullen moved down the document with the help of Vale. Full medical care they'd gotten a taste of already, a whole-ass house provided by OTAC upon completion of their training, and equipment privileges a notch below what Cole had seen on the King's personal guard. Not quite what he'd been hoping for, but time and performance would get them better gear, he was sure of it. Those iridescent scales were already calling his name, and if not those scales, then whatever he might find out in the field, apparently. Spoils rights? He asked. Yes, the arrangement does include material considerations. Cullen studied Cole, probably trying to gauge his reaction. Recovery rights. Salvage. You'll find our accounting methods most accommodating in that regard. Incentive, to put it lightly, should the threat of extinction be insufficient. Fotham had mentioned that before, extinction. After last night, Cole had zero doubts about what that meant. All those anime shows, with their tragic misunderstood demon races looking for peace. Ain't no way could he reconcile that with a coordinated infiltration and assassination attempt. And if that's how Seldorn really felt, then the command structure that followed probably had some flexibility built in, hush-hush concessions, even if it looked rigid on paper. Seldorn's tech, or lack thereof, probably gave another point to that. No radios, no micromanagement. Hard to backseat drive when the higher-ups couldn't even reach the driver after all. Though that cut both ways, no quick calls for support, no real-time coordination with other units, unless they somehow got pocket-scrying pains sitting around. They'd be truly operating independently, whether anyone liked it or not. Might even work in their favor. Nothing quite like comms limitations to force command to trust their judgment in the field. Still, the whole setup reeked of potential clusterfucks. If they had to work jointly with regular military units, then how? They'd use, what, runners? Signal flags? Trying to navigate these clauses was challenging enough when Cole barely understood how OTAC or their army functioned beyond basic organization, or how their weapons felt. As lacking as his intel was, seeing their proposal was still helpful. They'd sketched out some basics in preparation for this meeting back at the infirmary. Now they had the actual terms to work with, or around. Better to step aside, get their arguments straight, list out the changes they'd need to implement. Prime Minister, Director General, would you mind if we took a few minutes to review these terms in detail? Of course, the Prime Minister replied. Please take whatever time you require. The antechamber through that door should serve adequately for your discussion. Cole led the way into the other room, Miles and Ethan following. Vale trailed behind. Having a government official present for their private discussion kind of killed the point, but orders were orders. The door's solid thunk behind them would keep this private enough, and if the Seldornians could secretly listen in with magic, well, one extra pair of ears wouldn't make much difference. Ethan got the first word in, of course. So pays solid at least. Cole put the document on a side table. Not that we know what a crown buys exactly. But hey, regional merchant money is regional merchant money. If I may, sir, Vale offered, a standard golden crown is enough to sustain a family's rent and food for several months. No mere morsels at that. Sheesh, Miles whistled. Great benefits too, can't lie. A house and free healers, hell, that's a sight better than sitting in base housing, hoping Tricare don't leave you hanging. Only thing missing's a retirement package. Ethan snorted. Pretty sure 50 crowns a month is the retirement package. Yeah, can't argue with that. Miles shrugged. But gear-wise? I'm guessing these Slayers are a step up from the old off-the-rack specials. Cole nodded. And if those badass rifles they came across earlier were simply standard issue, who knew what OTAC had in store for their Slayers? Most likely, but we can ask to confirm. Same with the stuff about authority. Doesn't really say in here, does it? Ain't fine shit. Miles squinted at the strange script before looking up at Vale. What's this part about? Vale scanned where Miles pointed. You shall be vested with legal and civil authority equal in measure to that of Slayer captains, and empowered to act in like capacity under the laws and ordinances governing such office. Miles nodded. Thanks. Doesn't say nothing about Slayer captains, though. Indeed it does not, Vale confirmed. The preceding sections do reference standard authorities, though I admit the parameters are rather vague. Honesty from the interpreter. That was something. Yeah, we'll ask about that too. You guys got anything else? Cole glanced at the others. Both of them shook their heads. All right, I want to go over the main concern. Ethan leaned over a chair. Same thing that got Miles riled up, I'm betting. That dumbass autonomy clause, he groaned. We ain't getting carte blanche right off the bat, Cole said. Might take a while. Last night's a compelling argument, though. We did all that with no hand-holding. Miles crossed his arms. We're still a question mark. Far as they're concerned, could have just been dumb luck. Maybe. So we roll with their setup for now. Training period, oversight, whatever. But with our own conditions. Show 'em how we work. Make it clear last night wasn't a fluke. Make 'em see that it worked because we called our own shots. Like breaching the walls, Ethan added. Yeah, so we have them agree to ramp up. Maybe something like a notch looser for each successful mission or over time. Then we revisit that Fernal guy or whoever he sends and re-evaluate. Push for more room. Yeah, sounds solid, Miles agreed, Ethan nodding alongside. All right, let's go. The officials looked up as they walked back in, probably done with their own little side chat. Gentlemen, Alric said. He glanced down at an open notebook that no doubt contained contingencies upon contingencies. Have you reached any conclusions? Some. Cole dropped back into his seat. We're going to need to clarify some stuff, though. First, this bit about Slayer Captain Authority, what does that actually mean? Jurisdiction, operational scope, all that. You will operate at your own behest in all matters of demonic or cultist activity, Cullen answered. Local enforcement, police, sheriffs, marshals, town guards, they serve at your discretion. Sounded a bit iffy. Not that he was complaining with the powers of an inquisitor being the recipient of such privileges and all. Still was kind of fucked up, being Big Brother himself. And who decides that? Us? Someone else? Cullen didn't hesitate. You investigate as necessity dictates. Approval is not required. The understanding, of course, is that this authority serves my office alone. The Crown does not tolerate overreach, censure, dismissal, or worse, depending on how far one's ambitions might stray. And investigation includes anyone, right? Law enforcement themselves. Nobles? Cullen let out a slow breath. It does, yes. And you can imagine, exercising that authority with certain individuals requires careful handling. Some are less inclined to cooperate than others. Police can be territorial. Nobles, defensive. Both, stubborn. You will have the authority to act, of course, but it's often wise to ensure your actions are as unimpeachable as your intent. Noble grievances, justified or not, can be rather troublesome. Miles snorted faintly beside him. Cole resisted the urge to mirror it. Troublesome, sure, was one way to put it, and hopefully he'd never have to find out. Lots of privileges for slayers, then. I imagine the weapons aren't exempt. This got a different reaction, almost like a co-worker perking up when mentioning the game last night instead of droning on about printer refills. He smiled. Our equipment exceeds conventional standards. Mithril alloys, enchantments, quality necessitated by the threats we face. Cole raised an eyebrow. Better than the King's Guard? Scarcely. However, veteran slayers, specialized units, those under my direct command, they carry comparable arms, sometimes superior. Standard slayer equipment proves adequate for most encounters. Far better than what the good general equips his men with, should that be your concern. Miles gave a soft scoff. Adequate, huh? Cullen glanced his way, unfazed. It keeps slayers breathing. Custom provisions, you understand, must be earned. No exceptions, even for heroes. Advanced enchantments, specialized tools. Prove yourselves worthy, and you may earn the privileges of demonstrated competence. Cole tilted his head up a bit. Demonstrated competence. Cullen didn't blink, but he for sure knew what the repetition implied. But just in case he needed that extra push. Last night was a bit of a surprise. VIPs getting hit wasn't in anyone's playbook, but even despite that, we spotted the infiltration, pulled the defense together, and dropped the bastards. Hadn't even gotten the opportunity to learn any offensive magic either. A commendable effort, Cullen admitted, but one engagement. Cole cut him off gently. Doesn't prove anything long-term, sure. But it builds precedent. He navigated to the command structure and autonomy section in their proposal. Precedent, I'm confident, that justifies some adjustments to your terms. Cullen leaned forward. I'm listening. Simple structure. We'll agree to the standard privileges you've outlined, expand after training's complete, then full autonomy, or at least mounting autonomy after we earn some trust. Having a say in missions, mission parameters. Yes, that is reasonable. I can grant your team certain flexibilities now, given recent events. Cullen tapped his chin. We may revisit your privileges after each successful mission. Good. They'd had to do the same for Delta, only fair it was the same here. I suppose we'll be dealing with the standard metrics. Outcomes, how well we achieved them, losses, and so on. Indeed. The single word carried finality. Cole glanced at his team. Satisfactory enough, based on their nods. All right, I can agree to that. One condition, though, my team stays intact and under my command. Ah, but your team must evolve to meet its challenges. What say you, should we find compatible additions? Potions, after all, are no substitute to a skilled healer's touch. Cole paused. Yeah, Cullen got him there. Max condition already left enough of a hole in their composition. Compatible additions we'll consider, contingent on our approval. Splitting us up, though? Not happening. Acceptable. Another response where the man didn't hesitate, probably expected this. A deeper voice interjected, General Galahad, speaking for the first time since the meeting started. And should you prove your worth to the Director General, I'd be willing to grant similar considerations for operations with my forces. Lieutenant, you've served in this United States Army for some time, I expect? 8 years, Cole replied. Special operations mostly. Capital. Then you understand the coordination of disparate units. The general's mustache twitched. I should be most pleased to hear how your forces manage such endeavors. No doubt you've insights for us. Smart guy. Cole's weapons alone probably told Galahad everything he needed to know about where they came from, a place centuries ahead in military development. No wonder he wanted to pick their brains about modern doctrine. Happy to share what I can, General. Very well. Then we'll explore further once you've completed your training with Sir Cullen's office. If there are no other matters to address. Alric glanced around the table. Sir Fotham. Fotham shrugged. We've little say in the matter regardless. But yes, the terms are satisfactory thus far. And our heroes? All right by me, Ethan said. Miles's subsequent agreement was all Cole needed to finalize the deal. Yeah, we're ready to sign off on it. Excellent. Alric motioned to a scribe who'd been quietly scratching away in the corner. The revised articles shall be prepared momentarily. About 10 minutes later, the scribe presented the stack of copies to Alric. Vale translated each revision, maintaining that same diplomatic precision despite what had to be a sore throat by now. Everything seemed all right, at least. He wasn't the best with this founding father-ass legalese, but between Vale's translation and the document's length, it'd be impossible to miss a hidden clause. The Seldonians signed first, then passed it to Cole. Vale read each section one final time, probably as much for the record as for them. Cole signed, then passed it to Miles and Ethan. Left a spot for Mac, whenever he finally woke up. Alric collected the signatures. We shall have these processed immediately. Good day, gentlemen. That only left one last question. Director General, Cole turned to Cullen. What's next? We'll need some time to conduct our internal review first, ensure the office is free of infiltrators. In the meantime, I believe it prudent that you and your team learn basic elemental magic, as per Director Fallamore's recommendation. Chapter 12, Fundamentals. Miles checked his watch for about the 10th time since breakfast. First actual spells, huh? Cole glanced over. Good to see the man excited about something. Anything. Nothing like new toys to get an operator's mind right and away from the reality of being tossed into another world. Betcha it's gonna be fire, Ethan said, mirroring Miles. Fantasy shit always starts with fire. Miles snorted. Hell, wouldn't shock me if they had us crunching numbers on specific heat or some shit. Out of everyone, Mac would probably love this the most. But no point in saying that out loud. A simple yeah, a chuckle, and an external interruption worked wonders. A woman in her late 20s waltzed through the training hall's entrance, pretty, with brunette curls matching the bounce of her steps. Good morning. She greeted them with a warm smile. You must be the new Slayers, Lieutenant Mercer, Sergeant Walker, and Sergeant Garrett, if I'm not mistaken. Cole nodded. That's right. And you're Lady Verna? Indeed, the very same. Her personality seemed a bit more upbeat than what he'd have expected, especially out of a Keldornian office. But hey, it could be fun. Verna approached them. I've been most eager to make your acquaintance. Sir Fotham spoke in glowing terms of your barrier work on the day of your arrival, and then that dreadful business with the demons, utterly extraordinary, having to face them on your very first night. She leaned in, covering a part of her mouth with her hand. And then having to deal with the bureaucrats the very next day. Truly extraordinary indeed. How do you fare this morning? We're managing, Cole admitted. Can't get any worse than rock bottom, eh? Think we're all ready to learn something a bit more offensive than barriers, though. A touch of restlessness already, I see. She grinned. Well, I suppose I can't fault you for that. But do not be so hasty to dismiss barriers. They're one of the most versatile conjurations. Yeah, can't lie. They sure as hell saved our asses, Miles said. Verna sat on a nearby table. And how fares your companion? Safe and sound, lethargy aside, Ethan sighed. Least he's stable, I guess. That is heartening to hear. The healers here are exemplary in their craft. He shall be quite himself before long, I am sure. She took in the room, eyes settling on the tables behind them. Now then, as you've already demonstrated remarkable aptitude with barrier magic, Sir Fotham deemed it appropriate you expand your options. Something a bit more offensive than barriers, yes? Cole followed her as she got up from the table. Just here by the basins, if you please. We shall begin with temperature manipulation. Starting slow then? Ethan asked. Quite so. One cannot have the castle reduced to ash after all. She brought them to a group of unadorned metal basins arranged atop a table, each brimming with clear water. Verna rolled up her sleeve. Her tone shifted ever so slightly as she started their little lecture. Now then, let us address the fundamental principles of heat. Am I correct in assuming you are acquainted with its natural tendencies, how it seeks to equalize disparities between warm and cool bodies? Cole recognized it. Basic thermodynamics. Yeah, pretty much. She dipped her hand into the basin. Good. Touch the water. Do you feel it? The chill. Cole submerged his hand. Chill was probably the understatement of the year. The water was fucking cold, freezing. Almost reminded him of the good old days of Arctic warfare training, or when he lost a bet and jumped into that ice bath. Yeah, Verna continued, that is the warmth of your body seeking escape, eager to lend itself to the water. Now focus. You should feel yet another warmth, distinct from the heat of your own flesh. The contrast was immediately apparent. The sensation in his hand revealed two distinct feelings, sure enough. The chill of the water and that familiar warmth of mana flowing through his system. Consider heat as though it were a fluid, one which instinctively flows from the warmer object to the cooler. The more energy you impart, the greater this caloric fluid will move through the water. Caloric fluid? That was a new one. Though treating heat transfer like a fluid wasn't far off, it was just energy moving through the medium. But temperature manipulation didn't transfer bodily heat. If that were the case, anyone performing ice or fire magic would straight up die. So, how? Verna lifted her hand, water slipping from her fingers. Then, without a gesture or a word, the droplets began to steam. Thin wisps curled upward like it was the most natural thing in the world, though it probably was, at least here in Tenria. Begin with something familiar. Think of the warmth of a fire, the way it spreads outward and lingers in the air. Picture that heat now, but guide it outward from your mana and into the water. Cole directed his mana outward. Unlike barrier magic, he could feel exactly how the mana affected his surroundings. The water around his hand warmed up a bit. He placed his other hand in the water to verify. Sure enough, it had gotten warmer. Now, for proper control, I recommend an incantation. It helps. Verna stopped mid-sentence as steam began curling up from Cole's basin. Miles and Ethan's bowls started steaming moments after. Oh, well then, it seems Sir Fotham's praise of your visualization skills was no mere flattery. I should have expected no less. A word of caution, however, should you have any wish to wield this principle on a larger scale. The broader the effect you seek, the harder it becomes to visualize its workings. Boiling a cup of water, though it may seem the more laborious endeavor, is often simpler than altering the temperature of an entire room. The latter requires not only a vast store of energy, but also precise mental control over the flow and diffusion of heat. I reckon that's why you'll got them air conditioning machines and heaters on the walls. Miles tilted his head toward a unit similar to the ones they had seen at the infirmary. Verna smiled. Indeed. Now I suppose you're ready to move on. A bit more practice wouldn't have hurt, but Cole wouldn't argue with progression. Yeah, what's next? Fire. Verna brought them over to another table with a group of oil lamps sitting on it. Given your grasp of thermal principles, this should prove but a trifle. She pointed at the lamps and they sparked to life. Most begin with wood fires or candle flames. Familiar enough to picture, aren't they? I've come across excellent studies on caloric theory for visualization, though I dare say it's not quite suited to everyone. From the look of your work with the steam, I suspect you've a knack for a different approach, haven't you? Cole glanced at the lamps. Something like that. The flames sputtered out with a wave of Verna's hand. Fire was just combustion at its core, but there was a hell of a difference between a shitty campfire and the white-hot burn of thermite or white phosphorus. All came down to how well the conditions were set up. Right mix of fuel, proper heat and oxidizer, be it air, iron oxide, or something more exotic. The better the balance, the cleaner the burn, byproducts aside. Cole looked at the lamps again. Verna had lit them all at once from where she stood, a few meters away, perhaps. Interesting, given what he'd noticed with the manometer. Maybe the 1-yard mark was just there for standardization's sake. What's the range on this? An arm's length ought to suffice, though, as you've seen, practice may well extend that range rather handsomely. She spawned a small ball of fire at the opposite end of the room where a set of wind chimes and flags hung idly. The principle remains the same. One simply needs clearer visualization. She paused. Though I must confess, I am most intrigued. Your earlier efforts seemed unconventional. Perhaps a touch more discussion of control would be prudent. These are but humble oil lamps, after all, and I dare say we'd all prefer they remain as such. Right. Probably best not to apply thermite visualization to standard lamp oil. Cole focused on the nearest lamp. He'd seen dozens of fireballs form in media, but picturing a simple lighter seemed more fitting. A small flame, decent fuel-air mixture, but keeping the reaction temperature well below anything that had vaporized the brass. The flame ignited instantly, burning bright and steady with hardly any draw on his mana. Oh, brilliant! Verna leaned in to examine the flame. Remarkably efficient. Miles and Ethan hit their targets with the same precision, lamps lighting up the same way. Those looks on their faces, Cole hadn't seen that in a while, controlled but with just a sliver of a grin underneath, as if they were testing out new badass gear. Pretty much how he felt too. Sure, they were just lighting candles, but basic as this was, they were still manipulating fire with pure thought. Real fucking magic. Hard not to feel a rush from that, even for a bunch of jaded operators. Well then, Verna said, shall we attempt something a trifle more daring? Water magic is a curious thing. It never fails to surprise, even those well-versed in its mysteries. She brought them back to the basins. It is the very antithesis of fire, wouldn't you agree? Water has its own peculiarities, its propensity to cling and flow, its resistance to division, as though it were loath to be parted from itself. Surface tension, cohesion, adhesion. Basic fluid dynamics, essentially. She dipped a finger in a basin, drawing a bead of water that followed her motion. She then flicked it, letting it flow through the air in a graceful stream. It didn't really click during the heat and fire exercises, but now it hit him. Maybe elemental magic had been coming easy because they had a damn good reference point. Waterbending. Miles nudged his shoulder Told you it wasn't a waste of time. Verna looked delighted at their enthusiasm, even if she couldn't follow the reference. I take it you've seen similar manipulations before. Cole paused. He couldn't really explain a TV show to her. Something like that, he replied. Now then. Verna lifted her hand as the water arched into a flawless dome above the basin. Imagine the forces that hold the water together, fighting the pull of gravity. He started small, mimicking her little trick with the stream. Miles and Ethan had the same idea, streams forming without a hitch. Cole's first attempt with the dome came naturally. After watching enough waterbending, the visualization was second nature. The dome formed smoothly, and what little he knew about fluids helped him keep the form stable. How about this? Verna directed a stream upward and around her body, the water flowing like one of those gymnast ribbons dancing through the air. Miles whistled as his water stream twisted through the air. Shit's wild. His grin said it all. Cole hadn't seen him this pumped since they'd gotten those new NODs. Cole found this even easier than the dome. Of course, he couldn't imagine the pressure gradients and velocity vectors like his brain was some MATLAB program, but experience with scuba and pipes rendered the physics familiar enough. The principles were second nature to him and his team. They knew the underlying mechanics of why things worked, far better than anyone in Keldorn or even the whole of Tenria, most likely. And, as you might expect, she said, eyes lighting up, the same principle applies in reverse. Rather than adding energy to encourage steam, we draw it away to invite the water to crystallize. At her touch, the surface crystallized into ice. Now that's just showing off, Ethan said, despite his ice coming out just as clean. Cole had seen enough freeze-thaw cycles fuck up pipelines to understand exactly how water behaved during phase changes. His attempt created ice just as clear, all the cloudy shit from trapped air bubbles absent from his basin. Why, I must say I'm rather glad to have happened upon such talent. Verna's dramatic gesture at the ice had to be at least half genuine. Some slayers I've had the displeasure of working with have spent weeks just trying to manage a frost. Miles carved a small castle out of his ice. Well, I'm glad to disappoint, ma'am. Disappoint? My dear Sergeant, should this be disappointment, I must declare myself eager for more, Verna said, amused. Yeah, she was definitely enjoying herself, though it wasn't like Miles minded. He was smirking right back. Though, she continued, perhaps I ought not to praise you too highly just yet. Let's see how you fare with air and earth, shall we? She brought them over to the wind chimes and flags from earlier. It may seem elusive, being unseen to the eye. Yet surely you are acquainted with the marvels of steam. How it propels pistons forth and draws them back again, powering mighty machines with naught but its breath. Steam power. Interesting. Gas was just another fluid. Hell, steam engines were basically practical demonstrations of the ideal gas law. Just how much did they know? Like trains, Cole probed. Ah, yes, precisely so, steam harnessed to serve our will. Air and wind magic follow much the same principle. She raised her hand toward the wind chimes, and a gentle breeze sent them tinkling. A visual guide oft proves helpful. I shall summon some steam to... She paused as the wind chimes sang again, but not from her magic. Apparently Miles had already created his own current, sending a soft gust of wind over their heads. Pretty damn impressive control for a first try, though maybe Cole shouldn't be so surprised. Well, Verna smiled. That's rather unprecedented. Cole created his own breeze. Simple enough visualization, no need to overcomplicate basic fluids. Ethan's gust picked up stronger than his, sending the flags fluttering. Must have been thinking industrial scale rather than residential. Verna scratched her head, standing speechless for a moment. Well? Eager for more, then. Let us see how you fare with earth. She brought them outside to the training yard, the bare soil seeming perfect for whatever she had in mind. Earth differs greatly from the other elements. Where water yields and air scatters, earth is resolute. It clings to its nature with remarkable obstinacy. Earthbending 101, dirt and rock were stubborn. That much was obvious. He'd dug enough holes to know exactly how tough it could be. Though watching Verna shape a perfect sphere of soil mid-air suggested there were better ways than grappling with a shovel. Watch carefully. Werner reached out, willing the soil to form a small column. Start small. Cole focused on the ground. Start small, just like she said. He pictured lifting the dirt like he was shoveling, but without the shovel. Break, then lift. The soil separated with a thought about a cup's worth coming up. Lady Werner? Some aide approached across the yard, Fotham's office, according to that uniform. Might I have a moment of your time? She stepped aside with the aide. Their conversation lasted barely a few seconds. Well, Werner turned back. It seems our lessons are to continue for some weeks yet. Sir Cullen's office finds itself rather in want of hands, and so, I dare say we shall dedicate the coming days to refining these fundamentals, getting you quite at ease with the elements. With a possibly magical flick of her wrist, the dirt vanished from her hands. Next week we shall venture into proper spellcasting. Ethan perked up at that. Combat techniques? Indeed. But let us first master lifting dirt before we aspire to hurling pillars of stone at demons, Chapter 13. Awakening. After a few days of practice, magic had become almost routine. Granted, directing the elements with pure thought still felt pretty surreal. Werner had them lined up for progress demonstrations, but they all knew it was just a formality. They'd caught the hang of it by day 2, and while the practice did get monotonous, at least it was legit magic. Besides, rushing fundamentals never ended well. A tea service waited on one of the training room tables. Right then, Werner moved to it. Let's start with something proper. I've various teas for you here. Telsur, steeped at 160 degrees Fahrenheit. Marath, best at 180. And lastly, she set down the last cup, Wren's at 210. Mind the temperatures, for there's naught worse than ruining a fine tea by carelessness. Cole figured Werner would test them somehow, but this definitely wasn't what he expected. Tea, of all things. Something about getting judged on proper brewing made all that practice feel inadequate. Might as well get on with it. He started with the Telsur, amping up the temperature the same way he'd do it on a stove. Of course, he had to get stuck with the hardest to discern. Trying to hit that sweet spot between warm tap water and a boil was quite a pain in the arse. But he managed. Werner lifted the cup and took a careful sip. Perfect. Sergeant Walker. Ethan crushed the Marath test like his dormant British genes finally woke up for something. Werner's nod said it all. Miles drew the Wrens. Lucky bastard just had to crank it up to just under boiling. No finesse required, just heat till the bubbles started to hit. Werner gathered the cups. Right then. Let's move on. Water was next on the menu, and the task was simple enough. Manipulate the water in some bowls and show they know how to shift between states of matter. Water to ice, then ice to steam, then everything back to liquid. Cole didn't need a formal test to know he could do this, but here he was, staring down a basin of water. The visualization was pretty easy, just an extension of the temperature exercise they did earlier. The only tricky part would have been the manipulation of the water itself, but Werner had probably seen enough of their party tricks the past few days. The liquid spiraled up, freezing into a statue before discombobulating into steam. A little condensation, and it rained right back into the basin. It wasn't the most exciting thing, but then again, neither was the important task of loading a magazine. The next test was a series of hoops filled with faint smoke drifting through the air. All they had to do was guide the smoke through the hoops without spilling a wisp. Cole pictured the air currents like flow lines in a wind tunnel, then pushed with his mana to make them real, and voila! The smoke followed the path he carved, zipping through the obstacle course cleanly. Man, Miles muttered from somewhere to his right, rueful as shit. Cole knew that tone, new toys, old problems. After all those times eating sand in the field, being able to just push particulates around at will almost felt like cheating. And earth magic wasn't much different. Once Werner had approved Miles and Ethan's attempts, she had them raise a pillar, then dig a ditch. Cole crouched, placing a hand on the soil. The pillar rose steadily, stopping just shy of the marker. Without pause, he carved a clean trench alongside it. Easy, but damn if it didn't leave him jealous. If they'd had magic like this back home, half the shit they did might have taken minutes instead of hours. No more shoveling foxholes, stacking sandbags, or waiting on engineers to haul out HESCO. It didn't scream battlefield glamour, but it was the kind of thing that made life a hell of a lot easier. Not that it was any news to him. Shonen fanboys always got hung up on the flashy stuff, fireballs, lightning bolts, etc. They'd gobble up fights, but call something as great as freer and boring, like they couldn't wrap their heads around the idea that magic wasn't just about the explosions and OP shit. This, on the other hand, was what made it truly powerful. Hell, Ethan was already getting a hard-on over his new ability to shape terrain at a whim. That will do. Now. Offense, a prideful smirk grew on her face. She sounded like she'd been waiting to get to this part. Well, they all did. The earth restored itself without even a lifted finger as Werner walked past, bringing them to a section of yard where someone had set up earthen targets on stone stands. Offensive magic offers myriad approaches, but we shall begin with the essentials. Given your admirable progress thus far, I suspect we shan't tarry over long. A small flame sparked in her palm, nothing fancy at first, just enough to light a smoke. Then it grew and condensed into a tight sphere, a fireball. She launched it. Unlike the glorious weapons of mass destruction fantasy media always painted these out to be, this fireball started to fizzle out en route to the target. The final product that actually made impact was a shadow of its former self, leaving barely a scorch mark on the clay target. It was low-key disappointing. He'd seen Molotovs do more damage. The principles seemed similar, contained incendiary projectile, but the execution needed a lot of work. All part of the plan according to Werner's explanation. As the fireball traverses the air, it disperses its heat outward, warming the cooler atmosphere that surrounds it. This cooler air, by contact and motion, absorbs the fireball's energy, hastening its loss of heat. The very motion of the fireball stirs the air into turbulence, which further accelerates this exchange. Should the fireball expand as it travels, it will cool yet further, much as steam does upon escaping a boiler. However, with the proper refinement of focus and technique, one might counteract these losses to preserve its heat until the moment of impact. Let me guess, combining spells? Ethan asked. Werner nodded. Spell combination. Any novice may summon forth a flame or stir a breeze, but true mastery lies in the union of such forces. These principles, of course, may be applied to all branches of magic. Consider a simple imp or goblin in some considerable misfortune. First ensnared by gravity, then thoroughly drenched to ensure the full effect of lightning, and finally crushed beneath a stone drawn down by the very force that held it captive. Cole fought a chuckle. There was a certain je ne sais quoi to this absurd overkill. Of course, nothing came close to nuking a level 1 slime several times, but this was up there. Sounds a bit, excessive. Werner quirked an eyebrow. Excessive. I dare say it's efficient. The imps rarely raise objections to our methods. Miles snorted. Yeah, if there's anything left to object with. Ah, but there's the beauty of it, Werner said. The layering of forces makes even a simple spell vastly more effective. Perhaps not the most judicious approach for a lowly imp, but indispensable should you instead face something far more formidable, say a dread revenant, or some other commander serving under the demon lord. I imagine a fireball won't cut it. Not as it is, no. A lone fireball would scarcely do more than singe a revenant's armor, but with air magic. Ah, now we're speaking of something far more effective. Add air magic, and you invigorate the flame, much as a forge bellows does for a blacksmith's fire. Then encompass it within a barrier, and then you loose the fireball. She'd shrunk this one down to about the size of a golf ball before launching it. The compressed flame smashed into the earthen target, exploding like a thermobaric grenade. And this was her holding back. At original size, it'd probably pack the punch of a javelin missile, and that wasn't even the upper limit. Cole was willing to bet that there were tons of designs these guys had probably never even thought of. With some tweaks to the barrier shape and a simple nozzle for makeshift rocketry, it could hit even harder, but Werner was already moving on. Thus do the classical elements so captivate mages, easy visualization, and perhaps more importantly, they lend themselves most readily for enhancement. Classical elements, Ethan muttered. Not, like hydrogen and oxygen. Ah, well, Werner said with a slight laugh, we do keep to the classical terms. To remake centuries of practice merely to conform to hydrogen and oxygen would be quite absurd, even setting aside the difficulty. I dare say most novices would rather picture burning wood than concern themselves with caloric or kinetic reactions, or even the alignment of carbon and other atoms. Cole nodded. He was sure glad he didn't have to imagine millions of molecules undergoing an exothermic reaction just to make a simple fireball, though that spawned some more concern about how magic even worked at the most basic levels. What, so when someone pictures burning wood, the magic automatically handles all the, kinetic stuff underneath? Verna blinked. Hmm. She frowned, first time Cole had ever seen her caught off guard. I'm afraid I've no ready answer. Some have theorized that yes, that magic itself resolves such complexities. However, no one has yet been able to confirm it. All we know is that visualization works, though how precisely it does so remains a mystery. Perhaps the Australians knew the truth of it. Yet, as none remain to verify their wisdom, we are left but to speculate upon whether an understanding of natural philosophy serves to deepen the workings of magic. Well, it'd explain why we picked up magic so quick, Ethan said. Easier to visualize when you know what's happening under the hood. Yes, perhaps you are right. To comprehend what lies beneath may well aid the mind's eye. Shall we put it to the test? Miles nodded at the scorched target. Reckon we ought to start with air first, before we go tossing in the barrier. Verna stepped back. Focus on the flame and the pressure around it. Direct the air to cradle the fire. Cole tried his first shot without air magic, just to get a baseline. Pretty much matched Verna's initial demonstration, decent fireball that sputtered out en route. Adding airflow took some finesse, even despite the practice. The first attempt accelerated the fireball too much, making it break apart from the shear forces, something that barrier magic could probably be used to remedy. The second attempt got it under control, but he overcorrected, likely too much turbulence and drag mucking it up. He got it by the third attempt, though, not his best, but at least he could gloat about it to Ethan and Miles, who took 5 each to get it right. Adding the barrier was easier. It was just like treating the interior as an engine's combustion chamber, strong enough to contain the pressure but sized correctly to allow the reactions to take place. Suboptimal at first, but still functional. Eyeballing it was tough, but it only took a few tweaks to get the compression right. Within minutes, they were launching fireballs that hit just as hard as Verna's demonstration. She clapped her hands. Defying all precedents again, I see. Though, I suspect I ought not to be astonished any longer. Cole smiled. Hopefully they'd be able to keep this up. Guess that means we're ready for what's next then. More than ready, Verna said. Though perhaps we ought to start with something properly simple. Fog. You might find it rather interesting. The air shimmered around her hand. Fog was familiar territory by now. Cole had done enough practice to recognize that initial gathering of vapor. His usually spread out like bathroom fog, filling whatever space it had, which meant disappearing into the large-ass training room or blending into the surrounding atmosphere outside. Hers didn't. Instead, it engulfed their immediate surroundings without losing consistency. The mist drew itself tight, probably dense enough to eat radio signals. It turned into that perfect, unnatural white that made everything past 5 feet look like an old photograph. Real unsettling, but otherwise fine as long as a pyramid didn't jump at him. It made his work with steam look almost amateur in comparison, but he'd gladly take the blow to his pride. This mist had a ton of utility. It functioned less like the wispy shit from actual smoke screens and more like Call of Duty smoke that actually blocked line of sight. The mist dissipated just seconds after, and she moved on to her next spell. Now mud. A patch of ground beside them cracked as she set aside a square for demonstration. Water seemed to well up from within the soil itself, like a spring but everywhere at once. The dry earth turned into mud in just seconds. More water pushed up through the mixture, turning it into a slurry before it suddenly subsided, slightly solidifying the mud. This was the type of shit that would make the Viet Cong weep with joy. Perfect consistency, on demand, anywhere it was needed. No digging or hoses required. Wasn't as conventionally cool as the fireball spectacle earlier, but it sure as hell beat it in utility. Which would you prefer to? Verna began, but the door beside them crashed open. Elena burst out onto the yard, barely dodging the patch of mud. The grin on her face said everything. He's awake. Cole's heart skipped a beat. He damn near broke into a grin himself. Miles and Ethan looked about the same, faces screaming a mix of holy shit and no fucking way. They didn't need clarification on who he was, and they all trusted Elena, but they needed to see with their own eyes first. They sprinted through the castle's halls, leaving Elena and Verna behind. Cole's heart pounded, and not just from the running. Didn't Elena say several weeks to a month? They've been here just under 2 weeks, and Mac was already awake. What, was Seldorn's medical practices really just that good? Or maybe Mac was too stubborn to stay down as long as they'd thought. Probably both. They rounded the final corner, the door was open, and there he was, Mac, propped up against his pillows. He looked like absolute dog shit, but he was very much conscious and awake, eyes open and having a conversation with a nurse. Mac caught their entrance. You're not going to believe what they just told me. The words came out rough and raspy as hell, but they were his. Actually his, not just Cole's memory of them. Fuck, he hadn't realized how much he'd started to forget what Mac's voice sounded like. Jesus, Cole broke out into a grin. Sleeping Beauty's finally awake. The one and only, Mac said. Wait, you better not tell me I've got to thank you for the kiss. Chapter 14, Reunion. Wait, you better not tell me I've got to thank you for the kiss. Almost 2 weeks of silence, and the second thing out of his mouth was giving them shit. Cole grinned. Hell no, we drew straws and Miles lost. Poor bastard. Lost? Miles shook his head with a devious chuckle. I personally reckon it's more like one. Full ditty, no pause. He sat down beside Mac and gave him a good-natured shove on the shoulder. For real, though, it's damn good to see you up and kickin'. Ethan stepped forward and clasped the man's hand. For a moment his smile didn't quite reach his eyes. That same look whenever he thought about his family back home. That facade of a smile that often accompanied funerals. But he caught himself and got it right for Mac. Glad you're awake, man. Fucking A, bro. Mac's voice was rough, but the relief was clear. Been hearing voices for, shit, I don't even know how long. Good to actually see y'all, too. He glanced around the room, finally recognizing the glowing runes on the walls and the magic AC units strewn throughout. But, you seeing this shit? Tell me I'm not dreaming right now. One of the docs told me we're in some kingdom of Seldorn, and that I'm a hero. Mac looked between them. He brightened up a bit, despite how much he looked like shit. This an Isekai? Cole nodded. Sure is. Huh. A grin started to spread on Mac's face, then caught halfway as he laid eyes on Ethan. Hell of a juxtaposition, Ethan forcing a smile to reach his eyes, while Mac couldn't keep his smile from showing in them. How long has it been? About 12 days, Miles said. Most of that spent waiting on your ass to wake up. Well, and learning some new tricks. Ethan raised his hand. A small flame sparked to life above his palm. Mac stared at it, mouth hanging wide open. No fucking way. He tried to push himself up for a better look, grimaced. You can do all that? All that and then some. Cole could hardly help the smug pride leaking through his voice. Basic elements, the avatar kind, barriers, strengthening magic. Apparently it's anything we can picture. Like that hyperphantasia thing you told me about. You mean I could? Mac didn't even finish the thought. He glanced at Ethan before tempering his response. That's kinda insane. Yeah, Cole nodded. Once you're back on your feet. Apparently we all have the capacity for it. Something about the summoning ritual modifying our biology. Huh? We all got a new organ, Ethan offered, with a more genuine smile this time. Mana gland. Insane shit, gotta admit. Produces and stores mana, supposedly, and lets us do shit the magicians in Vegas wished they could do. Holy shit. Damn, that's fucking… surely there's a catch to that, though, right? Mac was clearly holding back his inner nerd for Ethan's sake. One of the docs told me we're here to play hero. Fill me in, yeah? Well, you ain't wrong about the catch. Miles shifted forward. Take a look out that window. Damn purdy sight, ain't it? Alexandria, capital of Seldorn. Apparently, they got themselves a demon problem, like Big Bad Demon Lord fixing to come through in the next few years. Real Sauron-type shit. And that's where we come in. Classic defeat the Demon Lord, huh? Never thought I'd see the day. Almost didn't, Miles said. They had their pick. Some Japanese kid with some time manipulation talent, some fancy bookworm from a whole other damn world, few others too. Lucky for us, they picked right. Otherwise, hell, we'd still be in Kuldat, bleeding out in the dirt. Turned out they picked righter than we knew, Ethan chuckled. Bunch of demons tried to take us out in our sleep. Day fucking one, mind you. Don't think that kid would have survived that one. Sure as hell bet that scholar wouldn't have. Demons? On day one, Mac asked. Cole had the exact same reaction when they came knocking on his door. Thought you said it was still a few years before the Demon Lord arrived. Ha, Miles barked out a laugh. Wish it were the case. Turns out they ain't waiting for their boss, or their boss came early. Either way, these weren't even normal demons neither, not according to the locals. New type, mimics. Look just like human till you kill 'em. Hit us up at midnight, playing night. Almost had us too. Cole frowned. The memory wasn't exactly pleasant, most certainly not the part when he got grabbed like he dropped the soap. Yeah, we'd set up for them. Fatal funnel. Not very fatal when you're fighting, those big guys from Resident Evil. Tyrants, Mac offered. Yeah, tyrants. Bastards soaked up 5.45 like nothing, Cole continued. It took damn near everything we had. Had to mag dump for a single kill. Managed to kill half of them before the Kingdom's guys finally showed up. So what happened after that? Well, before that, when we first got here, King gave us 3 options, Cole said. Return to our moment of impending doom in Jadira, live as normal citizens here, or sign on as their heroes. After that night with the demons. Pretty easy call, all things considered. We went through negotiations a few days ago, told him it was pending until you accepted it, though. Mac inclined his chin, then shrugged. Probably would have anyway. What did they agree to hook us up with? Ethan listed the important items, from their salary to level of autonomy. The deal had been rather generous and satisfactory across the board, but what really caught Mac's attention was the content about equipment. Of course, he'd also been the prime victim of loot boxes in games. Mac kept fighting down the smile, but it was like being back in Sunday school. The more he tried not to, the worse it got. Not like we got much choice anyway, right? He glanced at Ethan before adding, a bit more subdued. Though I gotta admit, it sure beats bleeding out in Jadira. And who wouldn't want to be a hero? His smile faded for real this time, and it didn't take a genius to understand why. Cole could see it in his eyes. The smile earlier confirmed what he'd guessed about that fantasy geek side of Mac, but the flash of regret. Cole didn't plan on prying. Mac had his own reasons, pragmatism aside, but if he had to guess, well, Mac probably saw this as a second chance. Redemption, perhaps. Or atonement, for the kid he failed to save, for whatever else he might have done in the past. Mac shifted awkwardly in his bed. The motion seemed to trigger something, a realization as his hand found where the entry wound should have been. He almost winced, but shifted to wide, disbelieving eyes as he actually touched his abdomen. Shit. He pulled up his shirt, scanning the area. No blood. Hell, not even a scar. Just clean skin. I'm guessing this was also magic. That would be my work. Elena appeared in the doorway with Werner, finally catching up to them. I'm Dr. Elena Gracer. I've treated you with healing magic. Huh, wow, Max said, starry-eyed as he continued to examine the unblemished skin. But the honeymoon phase didn't last long at all. That wonder cracked into something harder, like he'd just come across a civvy's whack-ass attempt at a tourniquet. Oh, the elf offered an awkward smile. You needn't trouble yourself on that account. The process quite thoroughly removes any foreign matter and mends the insides properly. She looked at Cole. He wasn't exactly sure what she was trying to silently communicate to him, but it wasn't a hard guess either. Yeah, Cole said, she did it the right way. Looked gross as shit, admittedly, but it wasn't like scuffed or anything. Watched your veins and skin pull back together, Miles said flatly. Plain as day. Mac nodded slowly. Well then. Thanks for keeping me from rotting throughout all this. I'm guessing you've done everything to keep the muscles working too. He paused, then added, any kind of magic that could speed up recovery? Ah, no. I am afraid there are no spells for such a thing, Sergeant Macpherson. Oh, there are spells that might appear the proper remedy, I grant you, but it would be no better than binding a broken carriage wheel with twine. It may seem sound at a glance, yet the moment it bears any strain, it would surely give way. Elena stepped closer to his bedside, briefly checking his coordination and responses. There seems to be no issues. Shall we begin restoring your strength? Mac gave a weak nod. Yeah, baby steps. Just so, Sergeant. Elena helped him get up. Gentle movements. We shall address each set of muscles in turn. Yeah. He grunted as she helped him move his legs. I'm guessing this mana gland counts as one of those muscles. Elena shifted gears a bit, probably recognizing Mac as a fellow practitioner of medicine. Not precisely. Though it does require care and attention, much as any organ might, the mana gland is of a far more delicate constitution, especially in your case, having suffered such strain. Mac didn't seem to agree. So we need to build it back up too, right? Physical therapy? Elena shook her head. Let me speak plainly, Sergeant Macpherson. To attempt magic now would be akin to drawing water from a well that has scarcely begun to refill. Your mana gland is exceedingly fragile, and any exertion, however slight, could well plunge you back into the same exhaustion from which you have only just awakened. I cannot, in good conscience, sanction such a risk. Doc, Mac said, trying to find a comfortable position as she helped him stretch. If I've been in a coma this whole time, wouldn't my reserves have started filling up? Like, if the well's been untouched, there's gotta be some water in there by now, right? Elena's lips pressed together, but she wasn't stumped just yet. A reasonable question, I grant you. Rest indeed permits the body to restore its vitality, and I should expect some measure of replenishment in your reserves. However, it is not merely the reserves that concern me, but the mechanism by which the gland draws and channels energy. Should that mechanism remain unstable, slight exertion might cause it to fail entirely. That, Sergeant, is the peril you must avoid. All right, I get that. But wouldn't a small test be the best way to figure out if it's working? Just a flicker, a spark. Right now we're flying blind. If the gland can't handle even that much, better to know now than later, yeah? A spark. Elena looked almost unsure, but she wasn't so easily convinced. You may well be right that testing the gland could offer insight into its recovery. Yet as innocuous as it may appear, I believe you might be. I believe you are overlooking the true nature of the mana gland. She paused, like she was going to say one thing, but decided on another. The risk is stark. You risk a cascade of failures. Cole fought back a wince. Mac looked like he was about to tear into another half-trained Terp medic. Maybe he had a case, but this wasn't standard medicine. Chances were he knew more about human anatomy than anyone in this castle, or even the whole kingdom, ever would. A mana gland, though. That sounded like some bullshit even Dr. House himself wouldn't be able to diagnose. And after nearly losing Mac, well, cascade of failures wasn't something Cole wanted to risk finding out about firsthand. Mac kept moving through his stretches. If anything, he'd become even more adamant. Fair enough. But I think the risk of not doing it is worse. Muscles atrophy if you don't use them. Even brain function drops off without activity. If we leave the gland completely idle during recovery, couldn't that make things worse in the long run? I mean, especially considering that you'll probably need heroes that can actually fight the Demon Lord. Elena hesitated, looking at Verna this time. All it took was one shrug for the good doctor to realize that she probably wouldn't be winning this one. Mac knew exactly when to capitalize. Just a test. See if everything's hooked up right, you know? If I can manage a spark without strain, we know the gland's stabilizing. If I can't, I stop right there. No harm done. Elena sighed. No harm done, you say, as though magic were so obliging. She stood up. Very well, Sergeant. Lady Verna, if you would. Just a single spark. Picture warmth gathering in. Verna started, but a small flame blooming above Mac's palm cut her off. How the hell? Ethan stepped closer. That's exactly what I did. Mac grinned, nodding. Talk about getting outdone. Ethan wasn't alone in the shock. You just picked it up from watching? Cole asked. The flame winked out as Mac sagged back. Seemed straightforward enough. A nonchalant answer, deliberate, definitely to rub it in, if that smirk on his face was anything to go by. Werner looked between them. You've already demonstrated the technique. Just a small example earlier, Ethan explained. Literally just did this, he said, spawning a small flame. Wasn't even trying to teach. Well then. Werner wore the expression of a chess master watching a toddler call checkmate. Then, just as quickly, it shifted to one of genuine amazement. To replicate magic perfectly just from seeing it once. She paused, then held up her hand. A small crystal of ice formed above her palm. Perhaps, might you try this as well? Mac concentrated on the crystal. Barely a second later, a similar piece of ice formed above his hand. He let it dissipate immediately, taking heavy breaths. Okay, yeah, I think that's enough. Cole placed a hand on Mac's shoulder. Yeah, should probably chill out on the magic then. We'll come visit, read you a bedtime story. They at least got anything good? Well, we're still on a children's books. Cole let his voice trail off. We? Who's we? Miles chuckled. I'm already on the damn editorials. Y'all are still sounding out the letters. Cole rolled his eyes. Can you actually understand what the papers are saying? Ethan laughed. On the bright side, the language is more like picking up a European language rather than trying to figure out Farsi. It's got an alphabet, letters, and it's got English construction. No weird syntax order, no logographic shit like in Mandarin. Easy to learn. Huh, all right. Mac's stomach growled. Oh yeah, by the way, Cole remembered, they got legit miso here. And a straight-up Grand Slam, like from Denny's. Shit's good. Mac raised an eyebrow. Miles shrugged. Couldn't believe it neither. Reckon one of them heroes must have been Japanese. Brought it all over. Soy sauce, tempura, miso, green tea, the works. Hell of a job too. Tastes like the real deal. But Cole knew it didn't end there. Whoever brought Japanese food over wasn't alone. Apparently dozens of heroes had been summoned before they got dragged over, all from different time periods, including Seldorn's founder. Though that wasn't really much of a surprise, given the imperial measurements and penchant for tea. Hell of a legacy, Cole said. One guy introduces a whole new cuisine. You know they probably learned a bunch of other stuff too. The city outside drew his attention. Civil planning, engineering, science, medicine. He then glanced at Alina. Actually, that reminds me. When you're feeling up to it, Mac, you should write down everything you can remember, especially about medicine and biology. Between that and what we know about guns, engineering, tactics, could make a real difference here. Alina straightened. I would be most interested in comparing your methods with ours, Sergeant. Mac's stomach chose that moment to rumble again. Food first, though, Cole grinned. Wish I could recommend the breakfast combo, but you know how it is. Plain sandwiches and shit. No doubt Mac was well aware of the procedure behind coma recovery, but it didn't stop him from being utterly devastated. Yeah. Fuck. Chapter 15. Warren Graves. 3 weeks into their new life in Keldorn, and it had been nothing but acclimating. The fantasy dream curdled into pure tedium. No adventures, no elf waifus, and definitely no freedom. Hell, they couldn't even get time to leave the castle and explore. All those grand expectations subverted to hell and back, and here they were, getting steamrolled under the weight of cram sessions, like it was finals week all over again. If this wasn't disillusionment, what was? But finally, they'd been blessed with a glimmer of hope, an intermediate evaluation from a slayer dropping by unannounced. Cole hadn't heard news until now, but apparently OTAC had finished their internal review and cleared them for integration. About damn time. Word around the castle was that OTAC had found more mimics than expected during their sweep. Most happened to be in the lower ranks, and the relatively unimportant logistics roles. No offense to anyone in that field. Recruits, maintenance crews, haulers, predictable targets, easy to infiltrate and often overlooked. But some had wormed their way up the ladder, Some had served as slayers for a few years now, and one had even managed to secure a captain's role. Nothing higher up, thank God, but still. No wonder the review had taken forever. Their evaluator was even more proof of just how serious OTAC was taking this. Built like the damn Hulk, there was something about the man that Cole couldn't put his finger on. Most operators he knew carried a certain weight. The shit they'd seen, the shit they'd done, like a shadow that never left. But not this guy. He didn't seem weighed down by anything. His eyes weren't hard or haunted, but steady. Like he'd made peace with it all. Like a pastor who'd traded his Bible for a sword and never looked back. No, that wasn't right. More like a pastor who carried both Bible and sword and wielded them with the same conviction. Sir Warren Graves, he introduced himself as he walked into the library, Slayer Elite of the Office of Threat Assessment and Control. However, you may simply call me Graves. The Crown has chosen to place its faith in you. I am here to see that faith justified. Graves. An interesting name, Cole had to admit. They stood up. The man looked at each of them in turn. Lieutenant Mercer. Sergeant McPherson. Sergeant Garrett. Sergeant Walker. I trust I've not erred. That's us, Cole said. Of course, their actual ranks, Sergeant First Class, Sergeant Major and Master Sergeant respectively, meant something to them even if they'd taken to simplifying it for the locals. Warren gave a simple nod. Please, be seated. As they sat back down, he walked over to a shelf and picked out a book. Lady Verna has prepared you as best she can, Warren said, returning to them. I shall witness your progress ere your induction among our number. We shall begin here before proceeding to the training hall. He opened to a marked page and set it before Miles. Sergeant Garrett, if you would read aloud the account of our kingdom's founding. Miles took the book with a grimace. Cole fought back a smirk. All that bragging about editorials was about to bite him in the arse. Time to see if he was simply bullshitting or if he was actually legit about his progress. Miles cleared his throat and started reading. His Texan drawl did interesting things to the stuffy historical language. Thus did Alexander Keldor, in the year 303 of the Sundered Era, having driven back the demons at great cost, establish our sovereign realm upon these. His eyes narrowed slightly. Verdant shores. For in his wisdom, gained through bitter contest against the infernal legions, he foresaw that the Estranian wastes would ever remain a wellspring of demonic corruption, from whence fresh horrors might emerge to plague mankind anew. Cole had to raise an eyebrow, reading over Miles's shoulder. So it seems he wasn't just talking shit after all. He did have a couple rough patches here and there, but nothing that simple context clues couldn't solve. Then came his turn. Cole picked up where Miles left off, whereupon he gathered his most steadfast soldiers, those who had proven their worth against the fourth tide, and there upon the cliffs overlooking what would become Alexandria, he laid the foundation of our kingdom. Let this land, spoke he, stand as an eternal vigilance against the darkness. Not by strength of arms alone shall we prevail, but by the steadfast resolve of common men who choose to stand their ground. Warren's congratulation came in the form of just a nod. Passable. Not much, but it'd do. After just a day of Miles's smug ass waving those newspapers around, while the rest of them were still stuck on kids' fairy tales, Cole had practically lived in the library. It was worth every minute of it now. Ethan hadn't done too bad either. Probably got just as sick of Miles's newspaper routine as he had. I must here set down a truth most remarkable, Ethan read, for I have witnessed what learned men would scarce credit, that our greatest victories were not won by those blessed with heaven's gift, but by common men who, when confronted with horrors beyond mortal ken, chose to stand fast though every fibre of their being cried out for flight. Mac had shown them all up though, caught up completely. Guess there wasn't much else to do, stuck in that infirmary bed besides read. He wrapped up the account from Alexander Keldor, even tossing in a bit of regal voice acting. Though a hero's might may fell demons, it is the common soldier's resolve to stand steadfast before terrors that should shatter any mortal's spirit, that truly turns the tide. For what demon can fathom such conviction? What force of hell can break the will of men who stand not for glory nor reward, nor even for their own survival, but because they know that if they do not, none shall. If Warren was impressed, he didn't show it. He simply moved on and pulled out several sheets of paper and placed them on the table. Simple phrases, market prices, travel directions, and the like. The essentials. Cole couldn't be more ready, neither could the others. Even if they didn't know the words, the language was essentially just English, but with different letters. They'd gotten the sounds down, so they could pretty much write whatever Warren dictated. A loaf of bread, 25 pence, Warren began. The butcher's rates for fresh mutton, 150 pence per pound. The quill felt awkward in Cole's hand. Definitely hadn't gotten used to that yet, but their pens wouldn't last forever. Hadn't gotten used to hearing shillings and pence either. Still, at least the currency was as intuitive as the quills. Simple, logical, easy to remember. 100 pence made a shilling, and 100 shillings made a crown. Cole could have sworn the British system used different ratios, but apparently Alexander Keldor had the right idea when he set things up. Would have been easier if he'd just called them dollars and pennies. But hey, he'd take what he could get. Made a lot more sense than whatever the hell the Victorians did back then anyway. Proceed from the northern gate, travel east along the river's course until arriving at the mill. Cross at the stone bridge. Easy enough. Incident report, Warren continued. Time, 3 p.m. Location, Office of Threat Assessment and Control, Artifact Research. Nature of report, suspicious persons. Details, 2 subjects observed. One is male, approximately 6 feet, wearing dark cloak. Finally, Cole was done. He glanced at the others, who'd also finished, then back down at his paper. No spelling errors, hopefully. Warren scanned their work in about 30 seconds. Sure enough, no issues. A proper grasp of our written word in mere weeks. Let us now see what progress Lady Verna's instruction has wrought. Verna was already there when they walked in, and for once she wasn't radiating sunshine and rainbows. She curtsied. "Good morning, Sir Warren." "Lady Verna," he replied with a bow. "Shall we begin?" They ran through the whole curriculum. Basic elements, barriers, strengthening magic, all topped off with simple spell combos. Nothing they hadn't covered extensively over the past weeks. Warren just watched, didn't say a word through any of it. When they finished, his attention shifted to Mac, who'd been standing off to the side. "Sergeant McPherson, have you had the opportunity to study during your recovery?" Cole frowned. Warren had to know Mac wasn't completely stable yet. But here he was, prodding for a demonstration anyway. "Just theory, Sir Warren. But I wouldn't mind putting on a show." Mac read him like an open book, and apparently didn't give a shit about intent. He readily accepted the unspoken challenge. These basic spells barely use any mana anyways. The surprise on Warren's face lasted maybe half a second before morphing into amusement. "Very well. You may grace us with this show of yours." Mac stepped up as Verna raised an earthen dummy. This should be interesting. Unlike the rest of them, he'd apparently been experimenting on his own time, decided that their training sessions were just a starting point rather than a script to follow. The mud formed exactly where he needed it, right under the target. Took them damn near half a day of drilling to get that kind of precision, and here was Mac pulling it off after what? Maybe a cumulative hour of practice. The consistency shifted in real time too. It started liquid enough to move fast, thickening as it wrapped the target. Mac must have seen a shit ton of Animal Planet because that mud shot up and struck like a boa constrictor going for the kill. Then, as soon as it wrapped around the target, it hardened. But for it to harden that fast, it couldn't just be earth and water magic. No, he was channeling every traditional element they'd learned simultaneously. Fire, air, topped off with expert temperature control to transform that soft clay into something closer to ceramic in a split second. Miles whistled. Damn, now that's some Avatar-level shit. Cole couldn't agree more. Between Mac's ability to pick up magic instantly and his willingness to actually experiment with it. Man. While they'd been following Verna's curriculum to the letter, Mac had said fuck it and started pushing boundaries. Combining elements, testing interactions, seeing what these basic spells could actually do. Hell, they could have done this too, if only they weren't so stuck in training wheels mode. Having ensnared his target, Mac followed up with a basic fireball. He started just as Verna had taught. Fire, air, and rapid inside a barrier. So far, so standard, but then he deviated from the script. Rock fragments, pulled from the ground and pulverized into shrapnel, began orbiting the contained flame. A second barrier formed around them, larger than the first. The front of both shells curved inward into a cone-shaped depression, while a small hole opened in the back. Son of a bitch. Cole could recognize that move anywhere. It was straight out of their late-night yap session about modernizing Werner's spell. Mac had actually taken their shop talk and turned it into something real while the rest of them were still playing by the book. When the spell launched, it didn't travel like their normal fireballs. It blitzed forward like a rocket, but Mac's control kept it dead on target. It crossed the distance in an instant, striking center mass. Unlike the rapid expansion of Werner's thermobaric design, this was pure directed violence. The barriers ruptured simultaneously, turning their contained energy into a focused blast. It hit like a canister shot, spraying superheated fragments in a concentrated cone through the target. When the dust settled, the dummy was just gone. The stone wall behind it didn't fare much better. Even Warren's stoic persona cracked a bit. His eyes widened just a fraction, the equivalent of another man's jaw hitting the floor. Werner had both hands over her mouth. Ethan summed it up perfectly. Holy shit. McPherson, that is quite a recovery you've made, Warren said. Take care not to overtax yourself. Oh, Mac laughed. He held up his hands, explaining himself in unparalleled humility. Still healing. All that. Just basic spells, nothing Lady Werner hadn't already taught us. Warren turned to Werner. You've taught them advanced combinations? No. Werner shook her head, still staring at the wreckage. Well, I did teach them the enhanced fireball, how to integrate air for added force and preserve its power within a barrier. However, I shan't take credit for the fragmentation nor the curious shaping. I've seen but hints of such designs in theoretical trials. It seems that these are Sergeant McPherson's own innovations. I see. Warren studied Mac again. Tell me, Sergeant, has your mana capacity been assessed yet? There's no record of it in your dossier. Sir Warren, Werner interjected before Mac could respond. Though his recovery has been most remarkable, the manometer would invite undue strain. He should avoid such exertion. A modest measurement shall suffice, Warren pushed back, only such as the sergeant's constitution can safely endure. He glanced at Mac, then at Cole. Of course, Cole could order Mac to do it. But this wasn't his decision to make, nor was it his field of expertise. He raised his eyebrows at Mac. This was something for him to handle. Dr. Gracer and I discussed this, actually, Mac said. We've been planning to do a baseline reading anyway, some way to measure recovery progress. Werner hesitated, but it seemed she trusted Mac enough, or at least trusted Elena's trust in Mac. Very well, she said with a sigh. Warren led them to the testing chamber, looking like some field commander who'd just been told his requisitions were finally coming through. Not quite smiling, but Cole could tell. The man had dropped that pastor-like serenity from earlier. What had him so intrigued? As they arrived at the testing room, Werner began instructing Mac. Stand at this line, she said, gesturing to the 3-foot mark. Simply form a barrier and direct only such measure of mana as you can safely control. The fluid in the manometer began to rise as soon as Mac started. Through the first bulb, second, fourth, fifth. The moment Mac winced, he cut it off clean. Warren almost exposed his disappointment with a sigh, but even this partial measurement was exciting enough. Level 15. Hyperphantasia permitting a natural talent with magic was one thing, but that kind of raw power on top of it. No wonder Warren was in heat. The Slayers had just found themselves a goldmine. Most impressive, Warren said, and with conscious restraint, no? I should imagine level 17, perhaps higher, at full capacity. Ethan chuckled. Damn, Doc. And here we thought we were hot shit hitting level 10. Hot shit, Warren repeated, vivid. Though raw power, while promising, is but the first step. We shall see what becomes of it. Beginning on the morrow, he addressed everyone. Report to the library at 9 in the morning. We shall proceed to the office's grounds from there. Good day, gentlemen. Cole watched him go. It was hard not to feel a bit envious of Mac. Seemed like everything came naturally to him, even mana capacity. Especially mana capacity. Visualization he could do just as well, if not better. But hell, after 3 weeks of being cooped up in the castle, Cole would take what he could get. At least tomorrow they'd finally see what Alexandria actually looked like beyond their window view. Chapter 16, Uncaged. 3 weeks of staring at the same view of Alexandria's rooftops, and today, freedom. Not that their suite wasn't comfortable, they'd lived like kings. Well, probably not on the same level as King Armand, but even then it wouldn't change the fact that they had been birds in a cage. Outside was a real city, one that gave them exploratory blue balls. Cole's watch read 8:55, give or take. After 3 weeks around magic, baking in alien fields, and being subjected to another planet's magnetic field, it was anyone's guess how far off it really was. Probably not that much, though, given the sunlight coming through the library windows. Should be about time for the 9 a.m. bell to ring. Of course, Miles couldn't just wait patiently. He hadn't stopped pacing by the window until now. Hey, there's that car again. Cole leaned back in his plush seat. Man, you're tripping. Seldorn ain't advanced enough to have cars. Besides, I've been staring out these windows every day. Nothing but carriages and those weird-ass horses. Trippin'? Why don't you come see for yourself then? Look, Warren's getting out. Cole hauled himself up and joined Miles at the window. Mac and Ethan had their faces plastered along the glass as well. Cole glanced down at the vehicle. Sure enough, it was a car. Not as pretty as a Model T, but getting there. It looked like someone had started with a horse carriage, stripped away everything unnecessary, and rebuilt it around a combustion engine. But unlike any engine Cole had seen before, it had wiring that snaked from a brassy, aerocalcum container of mana crystals to runic arrays etched into the metal. Whatever the runes did, it probably replaced components, given the compact nature of the setup. Well, looks like you weren't bullshitting, Cole said. He turned to glance at the others. You know what this means, right? That we could make a fortune introducing assembly lines, Mac asked. Among other things. Cole grinned. Looks like they've got the basic concept down, but there's got to be a reason we haven't seen these before. Must cost a fortune to build. Them crystals, for one. Sure ain't cheap. Miles stepped back from the window. And all them runes. Hell, no wonder we haven't seen much of 'em. Ethan nodded. Those runes could be doing anything. Not to mention how hard it'd be to even make them, considering we know nothing about making runes in the first place. Cole hummed. It was true, but that didn't deter him. Exactly my point, though. Sure, the magic stuff's expensive, enigmatic, yeah, but that could change if we study 'em. Mass production would be perfect. Mac had already caught his excitement. Shit, if they're already mixing magic with machinery, I bet we could optimize the whole system. 50 crowns a month ain't gonna be shit by the time we're through with runes. Magic tech startups, Ethan mused, staring out at the street. Though I'm willing to bet those Istranian expeditions are where the real money is. Literally, and for technology. If you can get past the demons, Miles snorted, and whatever else crawled out of those ruins. The door opened. Warren stepped in with a slight smile, brighter than the poker face that colored his introduction yesterday. Gentlemen, I trust you're ready for your tour of OTAC. More than ready, Cole said, moving away from the window. 3 weeks is a long time to stay cooped up. It commands attention, does it not? Warren tilted his head toward the window. First one we've seen, Cole said. Didn't even know Seldorn had cars. The Ferreira Series 8. He sounded like a guy flexing his new Porsche. So you're familiar with autos? You'll get a proper look at it shortly. It shall be our transport to OTAC. Cole followed Warren down the castle's grand staircase, the bell ringing once they reached bottom. The morning sun caught the polished marble just right, making the whole entrance gleam like he'd just opened up a legendary loot box. About time we got to see the front gate, Miles muttered behind him. Their suite might have been cushy, but nothing could ever be more cushy than freedom. The Series 8 waited outside. Up close, the engine setup made a lot more sense. The engine compartment was exposed but clean. Instead of a radiator, it must have used ice and wind magic. Based on the blue and green etchings, core was still just an internal combustion engine though. Not much difference on the outside aside from the runes, but he wouldn't be surprised if it did something like replacing spark plugs with fire magic, or used wind magic for pseudo-turbochargers. I assure you, it rides with a grace surpassing any coach I have thus encountered, Warren said. That's a high bar, Max said dryly. Warren scoffed. Indeed, it might have seemed unlikely in the past decade, but we have made great strides in both our roads and the undercarriage design since. Cole hopped in the car. The soft leather on his arse and a single look at the road was all he needed to know. Warren wasn't kidding. He hadn't paid much attention from the sweet windows, just assumed it was cobblestone like any other Victorian city. Instead, it looked like crushed stone. Had to be at least 3 different grades getting progressively finer toward the surface. The whole thing was sealed under something that gave it a uniform pale finish, though the granite aggregate was still visible beneath. Maybe the design and color wasn't intentional. But if it was, the Seldornians were a whole lot smarter than he'd initially given credit for, even on top of the shit he'd seen in their relatively advanced infirmary. The road past the exit opened up into wide, tree-lined boulevards, almost like a copy of DC's Federal District. The late Alexander must have been one hell of a globetrotter. A smart one at that, seeing he'd basically cherry-picked the best parts of major cities back then to design Alexandria. Granite facades and classical colonnades breezed past, classical revival. A lot of marble, a lot of columns, but with a not-so-subtle hint of gilded grandeur. You're familiar with OTAC's duties? Warren turned his head toward Cole. Yeah, somewhat. You guys hunt demons, but I take it that's only the tip of the iceberg. Warren nodded. Indeed. We do not serve under the strictures of His Majesty's armed forces. Our work is carried out by small teams, sent to act where precision is required. Of late, we have been tasked to retrieve artifacts from Istrain, items of little-known purpose, yet of incredible import. At other times, our charge is to eliminate greater threats or secure what must not be lost. What kind of threats we talking about? Mac asked. Demon commanders, cultist cells, yet I dare say you'll find our expeditions no less demanding. The ruins are deep within the enemy's territory. Cole exchanged looks with the others. Different package, but the core mission still sounded awful familiar. Sounds like our kind of work, small teams, surgical strike. Is that so? Warren's tone held an inflection at the end. Then you understand. What service have you rendered in this United States Army? Assassinating enemy commanders? Securing artifacts? Cole tilted his head. Close enough. Yeah, something like that. But we weren't fighting demons, that's for sure. Mostly desert and urban ops. Perfect, Warren said. The Australian wastes are much the same. Desert ruins, city remnants scattered throughout. Cole sighed. More desert, huh? Wonderful. Consider it. Warren paused. Playing to your strengths. Though unlike human adversaries, demons have little nuance, perhaps none at all. They are driven by pure malevolence. They have no morale to speak of. Their retreats governed only by the tactical reasoning of whatever commander controls them. Death machines that don't give a damn when they're shot at. Well, ain't that lovely, Miles muttered. Just means we can't predict them like people, Mac said. Hey, I don't know about that. Cole shook his head. They're smart enough to pass as humans. Presumably, they can also look the part without uncanny valley-type shit. They can think like people, I bet. More like, Ted Bundy, though, like a psychopath rather than any normal person. Creative and crafty as they need to be, with no limits on morality. The car turned onto the main road through the city, 4 lanes in each direction, separated by a tree-lined median. Painted lines separated carriages from cars. One of the intersections had lights that cycled between a simple green and red, with the hues fading like timers. A psychopath, yes. Aptly put, Warren agreed. Though they may ape the habits of men, perhaps speaking as though reason guides them, or pleading for their lives when exposed, they remain what they have always been. Creatures of malice, soulless demons. Beneath the facade lies neither conscience nor compassion. Against such malice, neither can we entertain such ideals. Then the Series 8 entered downtown proper. The wide streets turned into something almost paradisiacal, perhaps even to the point that it could have convinced Bob Ross to paint his first city. Warren gestured at the crowds. For their sakes. The first thing Cole noticed was a father teaching his kid how to count change at a stand selling some pretty tantalizing skewers. Next was a couple by a fountain, sharing the happiest smiles he'd ever seen. It was the quintessential apocalyptic movie preface. Normal people living normal lives, completely oblivious to what lurked beyond. Hell, even inside their walls. Cole could only nod along. Yeah, for their sakes. They look happy, Max said quietly. Probably don't even think about what's out there. Warren's reply was confident. As it should be. It was a simple trade, a logical trade. He got his hands dirty so the world could stay clean. But fighting against demons, difficulty aside, it was almost refreshing. No moral gymnastics needed when fighting against pure evil. The cultists, on the other hand, that was the real tragedy, wasn't it? Demons merely followed their nature, like rabid dogs. These specimens, au contraire, had tasted of knowledge and life, but had chosen damnation regardless. That was the thing about free will. It allowed the perversion that was absolute betrayal. To look upon your fellow man and willingly sacrifice them to entities of pure malevolence. Shit, Judas's silver seemed almost quaint in comparison. Cole didn't know which was harder to stomach, that they were once human, or that they'd willingly abandoned that humanity. Check that out, Miles said, nodding toward the docks coming into view as they exited the downtown area. Cole glanced that way. Huh. The sight was so alien it brought him back to reality. A team of Minotaur dock workers moved heavy crates, not quite shipping containers, but the kind that would have needed a forklift otherwise. Come to think of it, he hadn't yet seen any goblins, orcs, or trolls yet. Either they didn't exist here, or, rather classically, they were under the Demon Lord's forces. But as intriguing as the Minotaurs were, they weren't what fully caught his attention. Those cranes, he muttered as the Series 8 turned onto the elevated thoroughfare that ran parallel to the port complex. The road gave them a clear view of the docks below, separated from the actual port by a good 100 yards of clear zone and a short earthen wall. The layout was fairly standard, lattice booms, winches, counterweights. But the booms should have buckled under those kinds of loads. Apparently the cranes just said fuck it. Probably had something to do with the shiny silvery metal they were made of, plus those purple-colored runes. Whatever they did, he couldn't guess as easily as the blue and red elemental runes he'd often seen. Notice anything interesting? Ethan asked. Yeah, their stress tables must be crazy as hell. Cole watched another load go up, this one the size of a full shipping container. Then his eyes shifted towards the pulleys. 8-part line though, they ain't trying to brute force everything with magic. Alexandria's port authority maintains exacting standards, Warren explained, bringing them around a bend. The operational areas below were clearly marked, with dedicated lanes for the Minotaur teams and strict zones around each crane's radius. Even from up here, the organization was obvious. Not OSHA standard, perhaps, but nothing to balk at, given the insane circumstances this civilization had to work with. A sharp whistle cut through the air. One of the Minotaur teams cleared a zone as a crane began repositioning. Yeah, Cole agreed. Pretty exacting, all right. Seldorn's craft stands above all others on Tenria, Warren continued. This is the work of the Office of Thaumaturgy, built on relics recovered during our expeditions. Yet all of it, every device and invention, rests upon the foundation King Alexander laid when this kingdom was born. That you hail from the same earth as he. There is more to show you, though I suspect even our finest works may seem humble to your eyes. The port's cranes faded behind them as the city bounds gave way to open farmland. Neat rows of crops stretched out on both sides of the road, dotted with barns and the occasional manor house. Kinda seemed like the Old South, or maybe the English countryside, though neither comparison quite captured it. Either way, Cole had to snap a picture. For all of Seldorn's marvels, the machines they'd left behind were no more impressive than this. After a few miles of traveling at a moderate pace, Warren gestured to their first stop, a sprawling residential district that mirrored any suburban town back home. The houses were a healthy mix of everything from colonial to Victorian. More importantly, at least to Cole, the neighborhood gave Hollywood Hills vibes. Seldorn definitely didn't cut corners when it came to its slayers. These are the personnel quarters, Warren said. Housing will be assigned to you once processing is complete. We've numerous vacancies. You will have the opportunity to select what suits you best. Cole frowned. Numerous vacancies, huh? His Majesty believes in preparation. Cole relaxed his shoulders. For a second there, he'd thought it meant the usual mission attrition, not bad under modern standards, but typically high for fantasy settings. But nah, apparently it was just the king making sure his premier demon hunters lived comfortably. Though, it did make him wonder about the other vacancies Warren wasn't talking about. Slayers allegedly had a very high survival rate, but who knew if that was just government propaganda? The road leading out of town brought them to more farmland. Past that and the occasional settlement stood, the fuck? The Great Wall of flak towers. Cole glanced at the back seat. Everyone else seemed just as dumbfounded. The common image of a guard tower typically evoked some skinny structure with a ladder attached to it, accommodating a few men. These couldn't be further from that image. These were brutalist monstrosities, massive constructs at least 100 feet tall, with enough room for a dreadnought's artillery. Warren caught their reaction. The final line. These walls endured for generations, unyielding, until we learned to master Istranian concrete. By His Majesty's will, they were strengthened. Yet by His grace, their strength has never been tested. I pray it remains so. A fine prayer, but a damn harrowing one in its unspoken implications. Even from a distance, the towers were massive as shit. And he'd seen the old G towers in Vienna. The pale concrete had a sheen to it, kinda like the coating on the roads, though who knew if that was where their similarities ended or began. The towers formed a line stretching beyond sight, stopping at the beach and extending to the horizon in the other direction. As they crested a short hill, an expansive complex finally came into view, easily several square miles of military and bureaucratic infrastructure. The main headquarters stood at its heart, a tall E-shaped building that reminded Cole of the original War Department design, before the Pentagon. Various other facilities spread out around it, with the kind of setback distances and security measures that suggested some serious work went on here. Sheesh, Mac grinned, sitting up in his seat for a better view. Hell of an operation. One befitting its purpose, Warren replied. Welcome to OTAC. Chapter 17, OTAC 1. The guard posts and firing positions looked more Pentagon than Palace. Not the best against demons, but then again, that's what the wall in the distance was for. The only threat worth worrying about here was simply unwanted visitors. The singular path in was blocked by a simple checkpoint consisting of guards, a bar gate, and an arch off to the side. Kinda looked like one of those walk-through metal detectors at airports, large enough to accommodate even the minotaurs he'd seen earlier. This had to be the nullification field Fotham mentioned. Warren stepped out of the vehicle, producing his ID as he spoke with the guards. He beckoned for the rest of them to disembark, then approached the arch. Follow as I do. He walked through it. You shall feel naught but momentary discomfort, provided one is as they appear to be. And if not, Cole asked, then one is exposed for what they truly are and eliminated accordingly. Cole kept his pace even as he hit the invisible wall. Something shoved his mana back toward his spine, like Magneto was trying to compress his insides. Not painful exactly, but weird as fuck. At least this procedure didn't involve digging in his arse like with TSA. Not that anyone had ever dug into his arse, of course. Hopefully, with the nullifier as purportedly effective as it was, this realm would never have to face such an assault. Miles grunted behind him. Suppose it ain't as bad as standing under one of them guardians. Microwaves roasting you from the inside out. Shit, imagine if all metal detectors were like that? Cole shook his head, the pressure easing completely as he walked several feet past the arch. At least it's quick. The gate opened once Mac got through, and the guards stepped aside with nods. The drive to the main building took another few minutes, passing training grounds and some unadorned, blocky structures before pulling up to the entrance. The main building itself had quite the first impression, though. 3 stories of granite facade topped with decorative brasswork, because apparently even demon hunters needed curb appeal. But to be fair, it was probably more to impress visitors. After all, what better way to say that the demon situation is under control than to wave it away with grandeur? Warren led them up the front steps. He held up a hand, stopping them just inside the doorway. A familiar figure stood ahead, the head of OTAC, Cullen Fernal, still rocking that brigandine. Though after the infiltration, the paranoid fashion choice made a lot more sense. More than the fancy dress uniforms the castle provided anyway. That 1,000-yard stare hadn't changed either, though the bags under his eyes looked even heavier. Running internal security sweeps probably didn't help with the sleep schedule. And neither did business. He was speaking with a lupine nobleman by the main desk, your typical, distinguished gentleman with perfect posture and an equally polished manner, except, of course, for the fact that he was a wolfman. The guy wore enough rings to catch every glint of light, utility, or some sort of flex maybe, but one that fell beneath the Director General's notice. Cole had seen enough high-level procurement meetings to read the room. The noble chose each word carefully, like he knew damn well the real power wasn't in his rings or his title. There was something about Cullen's intensity that made it clear who held the cards, clear even for upstuck nobles who could buy half the city. Contributions of House Kaldven to the expedition certainly warrant recognition, Duke Alvac, Cullen was saying, though not as far as to warrant deviation from protocol. The artifacts shall remain with us. However, in deference to your unwavering support, I shall extend to your scholars the courtesy of a cursory study, though only under the condition that our examinations proceed without hindrance or delay. A cursory study, Director General? Alvac's rings caught the light as he gestured. A generous gesture, to be sure, though surely it would not profit your endeavors as well as extended collaboration. Indeed, I hear your teams recovered Estranian rifles. Were these studied and adapted for broader deployment, the forces tied to colonial defense could be redistributed, perhaps to aid OTAC's expeditions. With such arms, we might even spare a hero if the exchange proves agreeable. Our ranks are already quite sufficient, though I am curious how your colonial forces came to be so expendable. One might think Aurelian expansion would require every soldier at your disposal. Perhaps, but a single hero can only stand guard over one frontier, Alvac pressed. We've surveyed 3 new deposits in Gulhan as well. A hero may be sufficient for 1 mine alone, but your rifles would see a dozen outposts raised before next summer. Gulhan, Gulhan does lie rather close to Aurelian territory, does it not? You'll forgive my reluctance to deliver such weapons to their potential benefit. Cullen glanced at the doorway past Cole. Alvac turned, following Cullen's gaze. He laid eyes on Cole and his team, probably taking their arrival as a cue to back off. Then perhaps we might revisit this discussion, Director General, once you've had the time to examine my proposal in full. I shall have my secretary deliver the details of our current operations. Cullen nodded. Very well. Good day, Duke Alvac. Good day, Lord Cullen. The noble walked past them, offering a small nod. Cullen's eyes followed until the doors closed, then shifted to their group. His tired expression warmed slightly. Gentlemen, welcome to the Office of Threat Assessment and Control. He gestured for an aide who brought forward a leather-bound case. Contained herein are your credentials. You will, for now, bear the title of Slayer Recruits. A concession to propriety, nothing more. Your privileges, as agreed upon, are those of Slayer Captains. The brass badges had some fancy engravings worked into them with runes Cole recognized, simple barriers. Pretty neat. Sir Warren shall acquaint you with our operations. We will speak again, when there is something worth discussing. Cullen briefly analyzed their reactions, then headed off down one of the side corridors, probably to whatever kept those bags under his eyes so dark. Warren took them upstairs, winding through the building until they hit a set of heavy wooden doors. Cole pushed through and almost felt his jaw hang open as he took in the 3-story space. Shit, it looked like a good old tactical operations center built entirely from Seldorn's Magitech and minus the computers. Our operations center, Warren said, the heart of OTAC's response network. The setup was pure JSOC, or maybe even more like SOE, scrying panes all around in lieu of plasma screens. Personnel were spread across both floors, coordinating with people on their panes, while runners darted between stations with physical messages. The planning table dominated the center, with unit markers dotting the large regional map of the kingdom and the neighboring Istranian wastes. So this is what we're up against, huh? Mac approached the map, pointing at a large black square deep in the wastes. Guessing that's the Demon Lord's castle. Not quite so, Warren said, gently shaking his head. That ruin is but the remnant of a most formidable citadel, once the stronghold of the previous Demon Lord. Whether the new one has taken residence therein, well, the matter remains uncertain. These sable markings denote territories where we have witnessed the fiend's depredations. Our own positions, he indicated the blue markers, beyond an outer wall labeled the first line, comprise outposts of inquiry, provision, and vigilance. What are all them demons doing? Miles asked, nodding at clusters of black pieces near several outposts. Goblin raids. Small bands striking swiftly, then withdrawing before reprisal. Though they have wrought little harm, this aberration in their conduct is most concerning. These creatures, you see, have ever been known for their savage charges, possessed of wit enough to wield arms, yet naught beyond. Now they display a measure of organization, of tact, purpose. Goblins, huh? Cole raised an eyebrow. Of course they'd be with the demons. No offense intended to the settings with good goblins, of course. Still, it did prove that quaint little adage true. A good goblin is a dead goblin, and here they had the opportunity to make them good. Though after seeing those minotaurs at the docks, he had to wonder what determined who ended up where. So they're really evolving then, Ethan commented. First time, like with their infiltration attempts? Indeed, novel too is the presence of orcs at the helm of each raid. One might deduce their purpose, to season fresh commanders in the art of war. See how they probe each manner of outpost in turn. They, I suppose, mean to test the mettle of their leadership against varying prey. He paused briefly. Or perhaps to discern which targets warrant the risk of greater force. Cole nodded. They were using low-risk operations to train up leadership, evidently. Not exactly a new concept, but frightening enough considering formerly mindless demons had finally started to catch up. How are they performing? Well, I must grant them this measure of competence. Naturally, their raids remain inconsequential, yet one cannot help but observe their discipline under fire. Specifically, the nature of their retreats. Miles leaned in to study one of the marked outposts. They getting close to anywhere important? Not as of yet. In fact, we have found these incidents rather instructive for our own purposes. Where once they would hurl themselves at our walls with savage abandon, now they strike under cover of darkness or foul weather. They divide their forces, withdrawing the moment our positions present serious resistance. A hit and fade, then. This definitely didn't line up with the relative brutishness of monsters from the various shows Cole had been exposed to. As witnessed at Forward Post Nolaran, but a week past, if I might add, sir, a nearby duty officer said. With a nod from Warren, he continued, the fiends made cunning use of the dead ground for concealment, breached to within 50 yards of the eastern wall. Cunning, truly, the way they used arrows. Crude suppression, to be certain. Yet while our men were occupied with the archers, their spearmen used the distraction to probe elsewhere. Warren brought their attention back to the map. Indeed, we see fit to school our forces in these varied encounters. He pointed first to a triangle, denoting a research outpost. Our researchers must preserve their charge above all else. Their foremost duty lies in swift and orderly withdrawal. Our supply lines face different trials, should the demons prove cunning enough to recognize their worth. If they mean to learn the nature of each target, well, let them waste their efforts. They shall find precious little for their troubles. Mac spoke as a duty officer updated patrol markers near Gulhan. Looks like this is going to be our first stop after evaluations then. Yes, though this is but the first step. From there we shall consider escort duties. He gestured at the marked routes. Our expeditions oft traverse these benighted wastes for days upon end. A matter you might be familiar with. Somewhat, Cole answered. Can't say we've pushed through apocalyptic ruins before, but we have had experience with embedded operations, days, weeks without support inside enemy territory. Should point out, though, that this was against our fellow man. Demons, real ones anyway, are new to us. Then you shall find this rather different. The protocols differ markedly from human conflict. Formation, response, the very manner of engagement. You shall master these matters in due course. When you have proven ready, I shall see you placed with an expedition, much like these squads here, shadowing House Caldven's present venture. Warren turned to face them. And once you have proven yourselves in such ventures, greater opportunities shall present themselves. Our monthly expeditions, for instance. We've two of our finest minds occupied by an expedition. They are now conducting their studies within the ruins of an Istranian city. Greater opportunities, also Warren claimed. Classic Isekai adventure, right? They must have had two wildly different definitions of that term. To Cole, this would be hitting up some cozy taverns, gallivanting through pristine forests, maybe slay a dragon in the process. This, hell, their epic quest would be picking through dead cities in the middle of a demon-infested wasteland, probably dodging eldritch monstrosities and whatever nasty surprises these Istranians had left behind. And of course, it had all happened in another fucking desert. Yeah. Cole tried tempering his thoughts. Suppose we'll get there when we get there. Then we shall proceed. Warren gestured toward the door. He led them from beneath vaulted ceilings toward the sea-facing wing. The upper floors are reserved for matters of management. What we leave now is the domain of the Director General himself. His trusted advisors command the adjacent wings. Ahead, intelligence, the domain of Lady Sindra Thalon, our Deputy Director. Behind us, in the opposite direction, Sir Lauren Vonsel, who presides over logistics. They continued down the corridor, passing through the administrative sections that connected the major wings. Warren's pace suggested familiarity with the route, if not the occupants. My own dealings with the other divisions remain largely confined to matters of simple protocol and requisition. We need not tarry here. No surprise there. Operators didn't exactly spend much time with admin unless something needed fixing. Each doorway they passed presented the usual office setup. Staff buried in paperwork, officers reviewing reports. Important work, just not the kind worth touring. They never actually got to meet Lady Sindra or Sir Loran. Apparently, something about demon evolution had the leadership locked up in meetings. Perfectly fine by Cole. Besides, he and the others had seen enough offices stateside to know the interesting stuff happened elsewhere. Wherever they actually trained their demon hunters, and wherever they cracked open the Istranian artifacts those expeditions brought back. Finally, they completed the circuit around the main building and emerged through the rear doors. Damn, this place was bigger than it looked from the front. The compound was laid out like any base, with decent spacing between the various campuses, plus quite the stretch of empty land isolating what had to be the research campus. Come, Warren said, we have much ground yet to cover and the selection of your residents to attend ere the day's end. Seeing the more interesting parts of OTAC was already enticing enough, even for Ethan's doom and gloom, but being able to finally choose their houses. Shit. Say less. Chapter 18. OTAC 2. The training grounds sprawled out ahead of them as Warren led them past the administration building. Rows of packed earth targets dotted the firing lanes, much like the setup at the castle. An instructor at one of the lanes casually waved his hand, and the earthen targets started bobbing and weaving like they were on strings. Two recruits tried to track the movement, rifles shouldered, but kept missing as their target dipped and rolled. The one on the right even looked ready to blame his weapon. He'd get there eventually. The far end opened up into a live-fire course. The earthen terrain was shaped into an urban combat setup. Buildings, walls, alleys, but in an architectural style unlike the rest of Alexandria. It sported an almost contemporary look. The Istranians, it seemed, were closer to the modern era than Cole initially thought. A few shots rang out as they walked past. Warren gestured toward a 3-story building overlooking the range. 2 blocks connected via several open-air passageways. Our primary training facility. The first floor was dedicated to indoor ranges. The doors were buttoned up tight, familiar setup with the colored lights and warning signs. A few slayers huddled around a planning table near the entrance, probably sorting out their schedule. The second floor, visible through the stairwell, looked more like admin or educational space with offices, briefing rooms, and classrooms. According to Warren, they'd be seeing a lot more of this area in the coming weeks, learning everything from demon physiology to advanced magic theory. They exited, cutting across the passageways. The open air revealed more structures to the side, including a fitness center. It had newer construction than the stone facades they'd been seeing. Lots of windows and open space. Shit, it honestly wouldn't look too out of place on a college campus if one ignored the Victorian touches. Cole spotted guys coming in and out of the gym with a mix of uniforms and PT gear, towels slung over shoulders. Warren led them through a set of double doors into Seldorn's fanciest gunsmith shop. The castle being exempt from any comparison, of course. Wall racks and workbenches mixed with shit that would have DARPA foaming at the mouth. Cole could barely identify a third of the stuff here, starting with the simple manometers. Too bad the folks at Picatinny would never get their hands on this. Warren brought them to an older smith, breaking down a rifle at one of the benches. Some of the runes glowed faintly under a jeweler's loupe. Had to wonder what would happen if one of those runes got chipped or started wearing down. Given how these things could bisect a demon, probably nothing good. But then again, given Keldorn's propensity for procedure, maybe the gun would just be not as powerful. The next bench over contained rows of blue crystals slotted into aerocalcum fixtures. Basic charging station, probably cycled through a few hundred of these a day, keeping all their gear topped off. Rifles, packs, even those fancy cars like Warren's. "Mr. Marlisle, I'd like to introduce you to our heroes," Warren said. The smith glanced up. The man was shredded, so much so that Cole had to do a double take at his subdued, fatherly manner of speech. "Warren, lad, these the new recruits, are they? A fine sight indeed. Well then, step in. There's always room for those who'll put fine tools to better use." "Indeed so." Warren turned to them, motioning toward the man with the loupe. "Master Armourer Trent Marlisle shall oversee your section. Inspections are held monthly, unless heavier use demands more frequent care. Keep watch on your runes. Wear or damage leaves you no better than a common rifle. Remember, a flaw caught here can be mended. A flaw left unchecked will betray you in the field." Cole nodded. Their group didn't need to be told twice. Hell, he'd had Sand fuck him up one too many times to know just how important maintenance was. Middle of nowhere, random-ass desert, cleaning his rifle for the third time that day because even looking at the dust wrong could jam him up. "How far along are they?" Trent asked, shaking their hands. Warren folded his arms, nodding toward Cole and the others. "They shall require full kits on the morrow." "Right then." Trent slid his loupe into a pocket. "Have you any experience with arms before?" "Only the basics," Cole replied. 3 weeks with the enchanted ones. Before that, 9 years with all sorts of firearms. The others had similar responses, with Miles doing the southerner stereotype no favors. "Well, lads, suppose that'd explain the way you carry yourselves. A steady hand and a practiced eye'll save you half the trouble. You've only to learn the quirks and that'll come easy enough. Your gear'll be ready by 9, bright and early. Come find me then." Warren brought them out of the armory and guided them past the maintenance bays toward another set of doors. Through here lies development. Inside was a real spectacle, one that reminded Cole of DARPA, contractors tinkering with new toys. Except without the electronics. Looking through these labs, Cole had to wonder what they were cooking up next. Something about crystal drain rates, based on the cursing from the test range. Maybe it was for the guns on those massive towers. Development was spread out through several connected workshops. The main floor was assembly, basic testing, and office work. The side rooms and outdoor range were apparently where most of the action happened. One such room housed a testing rig with clamps. Nothing special about it either, just a simple device with pulleys and winches applying measured loads until something gave. Glass panels lined the test area, fragile as hell normally, but those glowing runes probably had that covered. It was no Instron, that much was sure. Friction losses, among other things, had to be playing hell with their actual numbers. They wouldn't be getting any accurate yield strength numbers, but the device probably told them all they needed to know, which material was shittier than the others. Right on cue, the test piece snapped with a crack. The thing went flying straight into the barrier, which lit up with hexagons. Guy running the test barely looked up from his notebook and opened the panel, hooking up the next sample. An elf greeted them as they approached the main workspace, dark lipstick, silver jewelry, and a formal dress that had definitely seen some creative modifications. Seemed like even elven nobility had their rebels. Sir Warren. Her tone was silk-smooth aristocrat, as polished as any other noble they'd met thus far, but she wielded it like a private joke. Come to see our torture of perfectly good metal today. Lady Cathera Valise takes charge of our materials research, Warren said. Lieutenant Mercer and his team. A pleasure, truly. She picked up a leather folio, tossing a wink their way, hopefully not towards happily married Ethan. Though I must away to the research campus. The biology division has grown terribly excited over their Nevscore specimens. Most resilient creatures, or so they insist. Indeed. We're bound there as well. They joined Cathera as she boarded a shuttle outside. Nothing fancy like Warren's Series 8, just a simple transport closer to an old tram than any modern bus. She settled into a seat, balancing her folio on her lap. I imagine you've yet to encounter a Nevscore in the field. Well, we've yet to encounter the field itself, Cole said, grabbing a seat directly across from her. This is the first time we've left the castle. We did run into those mimics, though, Ethan mentioned. Mimics? Ah, the infiltrators. Cathera leaned forward. Did you, well, see them change their form by any chance? Or had they already assumed their disguise when you came upon them? Cole shook his head. Just the end result. Watched one lose its disguise after death, though. Kinda like watching clay melt, maybe. She pulled out a notebook, probably jotting down the clay description. The specimens Sir Charles dissected exhibited peculiar qualities, flowing as though it were water, yet never losing their cohesion. No separation nor decay. I imagine your observation was much the same. Miles snorted. Cohesion? Hell, I don't know about that. Looked more like a candle left burning too long, slumped over but didn't fall apart. He scratched at the back of his neck, frowning as he dug up that unsavory image of the mimics. If this Sir Charles says it flows like water, reckon that tracks. Didn't see it rot or nothing, but it sure wasn't what I'd call solid. Dunno what else to say about it aside from the fact it was damn fugly. Damn fugly? Indeed, sir. Miles, was it? A hideous marvel if there ever was one, Cathera chuckled. Nothing of their like exists in nature, not among the living at any rate. We've endeavoured to glimpse the transformation itself, yet, well, our specimens, alas, lack the basic courtesy of being alive. Still, what we've gleaned is remarkable, quite unlike the Nevscore carapaces. Nevscore? You keep mentioning these. What are they? Cole asked. Warren answered without hesitation. Armoured beasts, impervious to sword and rifle alike, though vulnerable to field guns. The vile mimics rely on that grotesque mutability, hardly noble, Cathera remarked. The Nevscores, at least, seem designed on the merit of structure. Unyielding, enduring, dominance over deception. Cathera pulled out several detailed sketches from her folio. The first showed the creature itself, a nightmarish cross between a giant insect and a predatory reptile with a hunched carapace and 6 armored legs. And if that wasn't enough, the damn thing was clad in segmented plates, bristling with spikes. More illustrations showed scientific diagrams of the creature's components, from the structure of the carapace to its basic physiology. Their armor is, I must admit, a marvel, she continued, a composite of chitin and mineral and fiber, layered and bound together in a way that is, well, difficult to describe without study. Cole analyzed one of the diagrams. The overall setup was similar to old Japanese armor, boasting overlapping plates connected by some sort of fibrous material, a combination of defense and mobility. A lamella layout, he realized. How do you capture specimens for study? Mac asked. Can't imagine they volunteer. Ha, why that would be rather optimistic, wouldn't it? She collected her documents as they neared the research campus. To isolate one from its pack is, shall we say, an exercise in futility. We do not, as a rule, concern ourselves with capturing any live specimens. Their remains, pulverized by artillery or scorched in flame, are far more amenable to study. Outside the window, a power plant squatted near the waterline. Multiple stacks belched oddly clean white puffs into the air, while intake pipes stretched out into the water. No electrical lines overhead, so the various substations were probably connected via underground conduits. Cathara paused, glancing at the plant in the distance. Were we inclined to take one alive, the methods, I suppose, would be elementary. Earth magic and wind magic. To ensnare and suffocate. Crude, perhaps, but perfectly serviceable. Alas, such efforts seldom justify the risk. The shuttle slowed as they finally arrived at their stop. Another nullification arch spanned the road, this one adorned with more runes compared to the base entrance. The familiar mana compression hit Cole as they passed through. The second checkpoint seemed almost redundant this deep in OTAC territory. Then again, they still didn't know half of what demons could do. Those infiltrators had been one nasty surprise. For all they knew, some demon subspecies could sprout wings or burrow underground. Past the walls lay something like a Victorian university quadrangle, though the similarities ended there. The perimeter wall wasn't meant to keep threats out. The guard towers faced inward, arranged to cover every possible escape route from the buildings and courtyard. The space between buildings was open, but each building had a choke point of an entrance or exit. The north building dominated the complex proper, 3 stories of granite and steel built like a supermax prison. Definitely for securing and containing. Protecting, well, who knew how many breaches had occurred so far? Not many drastic breaches if the relative cleanliness of the campus was anything to go by. According to Cathera, the east and west wings housed less dangerous research but maintained similar containment principles. The southern wing, like the north building, was completely isolated from the other facilities. She cast an elegant gesture toward it with her folio. Artifact research. Here lie the finest relics of a civilization far beyond our own. Elegant, precise, and utterly harmless. Provided, certainly, that one approaches them with the requisite wit. Unfortunately, such wit is not always in abundance. Miles snorted. Ain't no way you're putting folks on this who can't tie their own boots, are you? You would think not, Cathera replied with a smirk that lasted a good half-second before vanishing. And yet, when the pay is substantial, there is no shortage of individuals eager to feign competence. The lengths some will go to for coin. It would almost be admirable, were it not so thoroughly pathetic. She frowned, not bothering to hide the look of pure disgust on her face. They clutch at wages as though they'll live to spend them, yet it is their own ineptitude that ensures otherwise. Ugh! Cole caught Miles actually smiling throughout the little rant. A hell of a rarity, but one much welcomed. Wasn't his usual smirk either. It seemed the goth aristocrat had a way of making disdain sound downright entertaining. Then again, anyone who could make thoroughly pathetic sound that refined probably had stories worth hearing. Anyway, she sighed, collecting herself once more, this is the domain of Sir Raylan Strinrick and Sir Jonathan Alassoir, our resident dwarf and elf research partnership, if such an absurdity can be believed. Their incessant bickering over methodology is nearly as entertaining as their discoveries. That they have not yet come to blows is truly a marvel, though I suppose their shared thirst for acclaim binds them together. At present, they are in the wastes, a monthly expedition. They stopped as they reached the western building. Sir Charles, naturally, will argue that his biological specimens are the greater marvel. One need only mention mechanical superiority to see the old lion's mane standing quite on end, as though a few mangled carcasses could rival the elegance of machines that might bend reality to their will. Such tiresome debates, but one must endure them, I suppose. Cathera adjusted her collar. Well then, I must away to my meeting. The findings shan't present themselves, though I suspect they may prove more intelligible than half the minds set to review them. She turned, pausing briefly to offer Miles a smirk. Do make an effort to avoid being devoured by anything unusual, won't you? Miles grinned. No promises, ma'am. If something does take a bite out of me, though, I'll be sure to leave it worse off. Warren watched her go, then turned back to the team. Well, it seems Sir Charles Sectar's engagements leave him little respite. An introduction shall be arranged when circumstances allow. He gestured toward the entrance checkpoint. For now, there remains but one matter to attend: the selection of your quarters. The estates reserved for you lie in an adjacent area, close to the mansions of the Director General and my peers. No doubt you noted them as we passed. Grand homes befitting heroes. I dare say mighty heroes such as yourselves shall find them to your liking. Chapter 19. Living like Royalty. We've raised 3 properties this past summer, appointed for those newly ennobled, knights, barons, lords, and for the champion we'd resolved to summon. Warren said, "You shall have the first choice among these 3, for such privilege is due your station." Cole glanced outside as they passed by a Federalist-style home, still a bit surprised we're getting this done during training. But hey, ain't arguing with that. Yes, the arrangement was amended. Proximity to the district should spare you needless travel. Warren's car rolled to a stop before 23 Ashard Street. Cole had seen places like this in the movies, the kind of mansion some British lord would probably live in. The average noble aristocrat's home in most Isekai anime. Everything still had that fresh-cut look to it, the stone barely weathered. The granite seemed to flow right up from the ground itself, no seams or mortar lines where the foundation met earth. The builders must have used magic to shape the whole property from the bedrock up. Miles whistled as they walked past wrought iron gates through a simple but well-kept courtyard. Well, hot damn. Reckon they're serious about keeping their heroes comfortable. Didn't figure we'd be living like royalty just for signing up. "Privileges due your station," Warren repeated, opening the front door. "Shall we?" The entrance hall was, well, elegant as fuck. Marble floors, wooden panels climbing 30 feet up the walls, and enough space to park a truck. And not one of the smaller Japanese ones either. A full 18-wheeler. "Little much," Ethan said, failing to hide his smile. Even he had to appreciate the absurdity. "This?" "But a glimpse," Warren said, gesturing to their right. "Come, let us see the drawing room." The drawing room was nearly the size of a small hotel ballroom. Plush chairs and divans were arranged in conversational groupings, all in deep reds and golds. Tall windows filled the space with natural light. "Through here's the music room." Warren led them through a side access. "Music room?" Mac asked. "A common indulgence. We deem it a mark of cultivation." The music room was smaller, but no less grand. A grand piano sat near tall windows, light spilling across its surface. Damn, they spared no expense here. And if that was the case, then how much would his phone be worth in comparison? Past that was a hallway that led to another large space, a formal dining room that could seat 20 easily. "Bit big for 4 people, Ethan noticed. "You've expectations to entertain," Warren replied. "Though your status affords you privileges, it comes with obligations as well." But what the hell could that even mean? That they had expectations to consider as heroes? That these expectations included entertaining people? Probably both, knowing how these noble things usually went. Cole stared at the massive table. He could already guess who he was referring to, but still, he had to ask. "Entertain, who exactly?" "Fellow slayers, local nobility, visiting dignitaries, His Highness, the Crown Prince Valerius, Her Majesty, Queen Adelice, His Majesty, King Armand." Warren shrugged like this was perfectly normal. "Social responsibilities," Miles sighed. "We're soldiers, not nobles," Mac finished, not sounding particularly thrilled about it. "But that's exactly what we are now, technically. Most isekai heroes end up with titles and estates. High-ranking slayers get knighted, and I imagine being heroes puts us at, what, lords, barons?" "Baronets," Warren said. Ethan crossed his arms, leaning against the table. "So, what, we're expected to throw dinner parties?" "Shoot, if they want good eating, I'll smoke 'em a proper brisket," Miles grinned. 18 hours post-oak, just like my daddy taught me. Ain't never had complaints yet. Ethan snorted. "Because nothing says Victorian nobility like Texas barbecue." "Hey," Mac added, "if isekais taught me anything, it's that the people always go crazy for whatever food the hero brings over. I mean, y'all saw the miso and Japanese food from that Aurelia place. Burgers, pizza, Texas barbecue, hot dogs, a good taco. Could start up a restaurant chain, honestly." "That's Warren paused, considering. Indeed, summoned heroes have introduced new cuisine to Tenria. Perhaps they may well enjoy yours, though you'll still be expected to maintain certain formalities, particularly in the upkeep of this property and of your image. Cole frowned. So hiring staff's a must, then? Indeed, and they are no random sort, should that be your concern. OTAC maintains a registry of thoroughly vetted personnel. Most slayers employ no fewer than basic staff for the maintenance of their homes. A chef, some maids, probably a butler to manage it all, Max said. Usually how these things work. Ethan seemed reluctant. Yeah, some help. Guess that makes sense. Dinner parties? Not so much. The social obligations may be deferred, Warren admitted. There are many justifications for a slayer's absence, particularly when such men bear the title of hero. But excuses will not last forever. Cole exchanged looks with his team. If they couldn't fight it, at least they could take solace in what benefits the job offered. They moved on to the kitchen. Copper pipes snaked across the ceiling, feeding into the stoves and that familiar rune-etched icebox in the corner. Smaller than the castle's setup, but just as functional. The adjacent pantry was equally impressive, boasting climate-controlled storage and even had something like a dumbwaiter system connecting to the dining room above. Upstairs revealed 8 bedrooms, each with its own sitting room and private bath, plus quarters for servants. The master suite was practically an apartment unto itself. The library and study were down another hallway, partially stocked with simple books on the history of Seldorn and magic. Overall, the property was objectively impressive. Hard not to be, considering their previous accommodations ran the gamut from Phobie tents to that safe house in Kaldat. Still, no reason to rush the decision when they had options. Better to see them all, even if this one was already a significant upgrade from anything they'd known before. What's the next one like? Cole asked. The second property, 8 Brunswick Square, was a short carriage ride up the district's main road. The design was boldly neoclassical. Corinthian columns framed the entrance, and the facade looked like something straight out of ancient Rome. The entrance hall doubled down on the impression, complete with a coffered dome that would have made Hadrian proud and gilded excess that would have made Gatsby cry. Warren led them through the same sort of rooms they'd just seen. Different furniture, different wallpaper, but the same haughty aristocratic formality. Miles barely glanced at the formal dining room this time. Ethan looked like he'd already made up his mind to veto this property if anyone showed even the slightest bit of interest. Even Mac, who usually had something to say about everything, stayed quiet as they climbed another sweeping staircase. The only feature that even got much reaction was the conservatory. Massive glass-enclosed garden space that reminded Cole of pictures he'd seen of the Kew Gardens. Probably exactly what they were going for, complete with tropical specimens that had no business surviving this far north. Not that he could ever imagine actually using this space, but at least it looked pretty. By the time they reached the library, with its 2-story classical portico and fancy-ass frescoes, Cole was ready to move on. The amenities were there, same Keldornian conveniences as the first house, but buried under layers of aristocratic dick measuring. Maybe there were people out there who'd be willing to don the toga, but not him, and certainly not Ethan. Last one then, Warren announced as they pulled up to 15 Curling Road. Our latest construction. The last one was really something. The mansion at Curling Road made an interesting first impression. Though unmistakably a noble's residence, it had none of that architectural peacocking they'd seen at the last 2 properties. Hell, they even had a garage out front, with enough space for several forayers. Well shit, Miles said, turning a slow circle in the entrance hall. His grin said everything. After 2 properties of stuffy excess, this place actually felt comfortable. The looks on the others' faces suggested they'd already locked this place in as their pick, and honestly, Cole had to agree. But they at least owed themselves a complete tour before finalizing it. The architect took inspiration from the ruins of Istrain. A touch too foreign for my tastes, I confess, but the modern conveniences it affords, such as the electrical wiring, cannot be dismissed. Cole felt his heart jump a little bit. Seldornian modern was nowhere near their understanding of modern, but it was as close as they were ever going to get. Electrical wiring? Yes, outfitted throughout. Warren gestured to an aerocalcum plate mounted in the wall. all derived from Istranian ingenuity. Cole noticed more of the brass fixtures as they moved deeper into the house. They looked like some kind of early power outlets, more robust than what he'd expect from Victorian technology. Though if the Istranians were somewhere between the world wars in terms of tech, it did seem plausible. From what he understood, they probably weren't too far ahead of Edison's time, but that was still impressive for this world. Alas, they see scarce utility. For now, their purpose is confined to the artifacts we recover, those we've not found much sense in hoarding. That our researchers strive to adapt them is no small ambition. Perhaps in due time these outlets will grow more useful. Warren brought them to the kitchen next. Here, if you would, one such artifact. He lifted a sleek metal box resting by a stove. An authentic contraption of Istranian make, prized assuredly. Is that, Miles squinted, a toaster? Yes, Warren said with a small smile, merely a device for toasting bread. But an artifact of rare pedigree nonetheless. Perhaps not as grand as its reputation suggests, but serviceable, I trust. Cole had to suppress a grin. Here they were, standing in one of the pinnacles of aristocracy, and Warren was proudly showing off a toaster like he'd spent all his caps just to get it. Though considering it was probably hundreds of years old and still working perfectly, maybe that pride wasn't entirely misplaced. They continued through the rest of the house, finding more pleasant surprises with each room. The living spaces were open and bright, with tall windows and that contemporary, almost modern feel. Even the formal areas managed to feel comfortable rather than stuffy. The bedrooms were generous without being excessive, each with its own modern amenities like magic temperature control. The workshop space attached to the garage was neat as well, probably meant for hired craftsmen, but Cole could already see how well it would serve their needs. The team had grown quieter as the tour went on, not from disappointment, but because they'd stopped looking for reasons to say no. This place managed to thread the needle perfectly, impressive enough for their new station without drowning in aristocratic excess. This was it. Well, Cole said, unless anyone objects. The unanimous grins were more than sufficient. A sound choice, Warren said. I shall see to it that your belongings are conveyed from the castle and that someone is sent to pick up Sergeant McPherson. He reached into his coat and withdrew a folded document. Your itinerary for the weeks ahead. Now, if you'll pardon me. Cole accepted the document. Appreciate the tour. After the front door closed, Miles plopped onto a nearby couch with a long exhale. Home sweet home. For real this time, huh? Cole looked around the entrance hall, still taking in the space, after everything that had happened in the past month. Yeah. Guess it is. Should make it a bit more like home then, Max said, walking over to the grand staircase. He jabbed a finger at the large, empty wall space above it. You know what this is missing? A big, fat picture of Mercer in that goofy-ass get-up, the one with the top hat and the fancy neck ruffle things. Cravats, Ethan supplied from near the front door. Wait, why me specifically? Cole asked. Max smirked as if there couldn't possibly be any other answer. 'Cause you're the team lead. Every noble mansion's got it. Giant portrait of the head of household looking all important and shit. Usually with some fancy props to show off their status. Like what, my busted AK? Cole snorted. Or maybe that toaster from the kitchen. Nah, man, Max shook his head. Gotta be more dramatic. You standing there all noble-like, demon head mounted on the wall. Or, hey, maybe they've got more artifacts laying around. We should check 'em out. They spent the next hour wandering their new home. The kitchen especially got Miles's attention. That walk-in cold storage was currently empty, but he was already talking about how much he could fit in there, all the exotic foods he could test out. Eventually they made their way upstairs to check out the bedrooms again, this time with more scrutiny, and to select their personal rooms. Damn, Ethan said as they walked into the master bedroom. He approached the private balcony, checking out the view of the courtyard out front. This is nice. Cole could already see everyone thinking the same thing. Best room in the house, hands down. Dibs, Miles said. Cole turned around, eyebrow arched. What, so you want your picture hanging downstairs instead? Oh nah. Room's all yours, Chief. See, I'm talking about none other than Lady Cathyra Valise. Didn't peg you for a goth girl type, Ethan said. Think it's the other way around with goth girls, Max snickered. Fuck it. Totally worth it. Cole couldn't tell if Miles was dead serious or just fucking around. Y'all saw her. That voice, that charm. Ooh-wee. Now that's the kind of woman who knows what she wants. Yeah, to peg you, Ethan snorted. Next we hear from you, it's gonna be from the darkest dungeon in her basement. Miles rolled his eyes. Y'all don't see the vision. Not like I do. Cole smirked. He could somewhat see the vision. Despite Mac's comment, she'd probably earned his approval already. But for Cole, probably too much for him. Elena, though. All right, I'll take this room then, Cole said. They eventually sorted out the rest of the rooms. All of the rooms were plenty big, each with its own character, so there wasn't much to fight over. Miles took the corner suite, since no one seriously objected, probably because it was the furthest from the others. The walls seemed soundproofed, so it wasn't really necessary, but at least the man was considerate. It wasn't until they were back downstairs that Cole remembered the papers Warren had given to him. He pulled out the folded itinerary. Basic integration stuff for the next couple weeks. Briefings, policy reviews, equipment maintenance, and so on. But something near the bottom of the first page caught his eye. Training mission to No Lauren in 2 weeks, he said. The forward post with the goblin problems, Mac asked, looking over his shoulder. Could be interesting. Got time to settle, at least, Ethan said. Get the place running before we head out. Maybe figure out the whole staff situation Warren was talking about. And commission that portrait, Mac added with a grin. Cole shook his head. Yeah, fuck no. Chapter 20. Altered Purpose. 2 weeks passed like a breeze in the trance of newfound freedom. Their magical studies deepened under Lady Verna, who made regular trips from the castle to OTAC. Individual talents began to show, and so did the hard limits of projection magic. A spell that could melt steel at point-blank range diffused to barely singe wood at 50 meters. No wonder people resorted to throwing fireballs instead of spawning them next to their targets. Their work with barriers proved more promising. Simple shields evolved into persistent constructs that held without constant attention, though the initial mana cost made them think twice about duration. The possibilities were obvious: temporary platforms, personal shields, instant fortifications. Not ideal for sustained operations, of course. Earth magic could accomplish the same feats at a fraction of the mana cost. But when the situation called for subtlety over efficiency, barriers had their place. Their enhancement magic had moved past brute force applications as they learned to target muscle groups rather than relying on wholesale reinforcement. They all moved like anime characters now, but Miles had taken to it with particular enthusiasm. Honestly, he probably just wanted to throw hands with demons. Not the optimal approach, but after that ambush on day 1, Cole could see the appeal. As for Mac, he'd made a full recovery. Better than full, actually. His mana rating had stabilized at level 18 after last week's test, a solid 6 levels above Cole's capacity. Moving into the house seemed to have done him good as well. No lingering effects from the coma, no complications from his physical rehab, which turned out just as he'd expected. Just the same old Mac, now with an apparently permanent boost to his magical potential. Whether the gap represented his natural ceiling or if it was just some quirk of recovery. Well, Cole was happy for him nonetheless. It seemed like Mac would be one-upping them on everything for the foreseeable future, until Ethan found his niche in glyph design. Most students could pick up the individual runes easily, but not the architecture. For Cole, arranging runes inside a glyph was like writing code. But Ethan? He must have seen them differently, given how naturally he took to chaining the runes together. Within days he was laying out sequences that made Lady Verna question his sanity. Then again, most sane people wouldn't choose to deal with bombs for a living. Then came the classroom content. OTAC's classification system divided demons into 2 broad categories: humanoids and monsters. Humanoids posed the greatest strategic threat, from the lowly imps all the way up to the dreaded archfiends. Each type had its own level rating, though Cole had noticed the instructors seemed hesitant to discuss the upper bounds. Goblins averaged around level 5, while standard orcs operated at level 10. The mimic that had infiltrated Otak as a Slayer captain had tested at level 13 before being discovered. Monster types like the Nevskors followed similar conventions, though their level 10 rating meant something different than an orc's. They traded versatility for raw physical power. A Nevskor could shrug off hits that would flatten an orc, but they were predictable, bound by instinct. A higher-level humanoid typically meant more adaptability. A higher-level monster, on the other hand, would just be a stronger version of its base nature. Like any classification system, this one showed its cracks. Levels were rough approximations at best, measuring everything from raw power to tactical ability. Their instructors hammered this point home. A well-prepared level 3 army artilleryman with the right tools could absolutely take down a level 12 threat. But the real danger came at the higher tiers, where no amount of preparation could bridge the gap. Historical records painted a clear picture. Only summoned heroes had ever stood against demon lords. The more mundane, yet equally important lessons filled the gaps between theory and practice. Weapon maintenance, equipment checks, proper crystal cycling procedures, operating a revolver, wielding a cutlass, horse riding. All drilled into them until finally they'd gathered for their first training mission, and an introduction to their newest member. When Otak had requested Elena Gracer for their unit, Cole figured they just wanted their best healer watching over their new heroes. Then he'd seen the look Warren gave her, not the polite deference he'd probably use with a family doctor, but the subtle nod shared between veterans. Their sweet elven doctor turned out to be a Slayer elite with a level 16 mana rating, one of the youngest in Seldorn's history. Not that Cole would have ever guessed that. The signs did eventually show themselves, though, namely how she held a rifle like it was normal. Still, Ethan had doubts about a new member. Fresh dynamics, unknown variable. Fair enough, but Mac's talents didn't include healing magic yet, and Cole had seen enough to know that magic changed the old rules. Besides, Cole had seen enough anime to know the score. Not as much as Mac, of course, but enough nonetheless. Every solid party needed a good healer. Standing at a train station now, watching the cargo being loaded, Cole realized having Elena would be good for another reason. They didn't know shit about Keldorn beyond Alexandria's walls. The train horn billowed. 2-day trip just to get there, huh? Miles asked, following Warren past the line of passengers waiting by the platform's nullification checkpoints. Cole shouldered his pack and grabbed his luggage. Their electronics still worked fine thanks to their solar chargers and spare batteries, but their options were limited. Having radios for themselves wouldn't be very useful if they needed to call in artillery support or request reinforcements. The goth elf researcher had picked up on that gap right away. Lady Cathera had been diplomatic about it, floating the idea of studying their gear after this first mission. No pressure, just an open invitation to share what they thought might help. Hell, Seldorn wasn't far off from figuring out radio tech on their own, though the scrying pains probably pushed back any real need for it. Their electrical theory was solid. Within a year, they could probably be fielding radios for all of OTAC and Army support units. Tantalizing, but there were also other insights they could give Cathera. Better bullets and new bullet types for one. FMJ, hollow point, tracers, maybe even armor-piercing and frangible sometime down the line. Their metallurgy and industrial capacity was already there, based on what he'd seen in Alexandria and in OTAC's arsenal. They just needed the right designs. Grenades were trickier. Enhanced fireballs already packed more punch than any conventional frag, and his and Mac's modernized version had only widened that gap. But there was potential there. He'd seen how they worked runes into equipment. Just how far could they upgrade frags and flashbangs and other types of gear with runes? Of course, some advances would take longer than others, but they weren't starting from scratch here. Between the four of them, they knew their gear inside and out. Maintenance, manufacturing tolerances, material specs, everything down to the fundamental scientific principles. That had cut years off their research time. No stabbing in the dark when they've got the finished product and the expertise to explain why each design choice matters. Hell, they could hand Cathera's team decades of ballistics research and metallurgy on a silver platter, complete with the physics behind why it all works. 2 days on a train, a full week for their mission in total. Plenty of time to figure out where to start. "We're not riding coach?" Cole asked. "Hardly. Our station affords us better than that." Warren led them toward a set of cars at the far end of the train. A second set of nullification arches waited there. Cole stepped through, that uncomfortable compression washing over him. No matter how many times he went through these things, he'd never get used to it. But after that ambush at the castle, he wasn't complaining. The steward checked their tickets and directed them to their assigned compartment. The private car was exactly what Cole would expect for nobility. Plush armchairs, some window-facing seats, a small couch near the sleeping berth entrance, and a central table with booth seating for dining. Warren stowed his bag and excused himself to check on something with the conductor, leaving them to settle in. Miles immediately sprawled into one of the plush armchairs. "Damn, straight out of Orient Express." "Minus the murder mystery, hopefully," Max said, settling by the window. "That's what the nullification fields are for," Cole said. He chose a spot on the small couch near the sleeping berth entrance. After stowing her equipment, Elena joined him. "Comfort suits you well." "It is a pity our destination cannot promise such ease," she remarked, tucking a strand of silver-blonde hair behind her ear. "All the more reason to appreciate it now," he said, offering her a smile. "No light without darkness, right?" Elena chuckled softly. "True enough. If we're to treasure the light, we might as well wring every ounce of comfort from it while we may." She glanced toward the miniature bedrooms, then back at Cole. Perhaps this train was meant as a farewell gift from civility itself. Cole recognized the sentiment all too well. It was steak and lobster all over again. "Sounds like you've done this before. Saying goodbye to civility, I mean." "Once." The way her voice shifted into pure melodrama almost made him grin. "And let me tell you, it is no small cruelty to be pampered so thoroughly, only to have it all snatched away. Betrayal, truly. Had they any mercy at all, they might have sent us straight into the dust and heat. But no, let us first be spoiled and then cast to the wolves. Why, I've not seen even the demons stoop this low." He couldn't help but enjoy her commitment to the bit. "So, betrayal by upholstery, is it? I'd hate to see how you describe the real enemy out there." "Oh, the demons will have to work very hard to surpass this treachery." Cole chuckled. "Come on, the adjustment's not that bad." "Oh my, to say such a thing before a lady." Elena met him with a raised brow and the faintest smirk. "I might think you've forgotten yourself entirely." Shit, a faux pas. He may as well have asked her to pay on the first date. Cole raised his hands, feigning innocence. "My apologies, Doctor. But to be fair, you are a Slayer elite. Which is to say, I possessed the wit to avoid such assignments hitherto." She sighed. "Though, as you see, fortune has conspired otherwise." "Yeah, some conspiracy of fortune indeed," Cole smirked. "Truly crazy how they're putting their best healer exactly where they need her." She gave a light laugh. "Oh, very good. Yes, I suppose they wouldn't dare let their precious heroes stumble so soon. One must ensure the tales match the substance, and you've certainly provided that." Elena hesitated at the end there, holding his gaze a moment longer before looking away. For someone who'd been assigned to babysit them, she seemed awfully eager about the whole thing. Then again, everyone had their reasons for fighting, doubly so when demons were involved. Could be revenge, could be glory, could be duty. Hell, maybe she just thought it was cool to work with a party of heroes. Tenria had tons of those stored away in various libraries and children's books. Or maybe her interest was more specific than that, given how she'd emphasized substance. But until he could get to know her better, there was simply no way of knowing yet. The train lurched forward, and Alexandria began to fade behind them. It rolled through familiar territory at first, past their neighborhood, past OTAC, past the military installations they'd gotten used to seeing on their daily commute. As they approached the final line, those massive towers finally came into proper perspective. Cole had seen them plenty of times from OTAC, but up close. The gun emplacements were enormous. Each one looked like it belonged on an Iowa-class battleship. Warren came back with their timeline mapped out as they emerged on the other side of the final line. Apparently they'd arrive at Nolaran by sunset the day after tomorrow, weather permitting. The route followed the coast for most of the run, which meant predictable conditions unless a storm rolled in off the sea. They passed by more farmland before a steward arrived to take lunch orders, and Cole let the others go first while he studied the menu. Elena had gone off about their pheasant, a dish seldom served without descending into something resembling a tanner's craft, as she put it. Yet somehow the chefs here always pulled through, as expected, for a railroad company that was apparently famous among the nobility. Naturally, they had to give it a try. The food arrived around an hour later, and just like with the Michelin star quality dishes from the castle, the stuff here would probably be enough to make Gordon Ramsay cry tears of joy. The meal passed with idle chatter focusing on Mac's recovery, and Cole found himself drawn to the window more and more as they rolled deeper into Seldorn proper. The landscape wasn't all that different from what he'd expect back home. Clusters of cities surrounded by sprawling villages and towns, connected by highways and rail lines. Just trade the fast food restaurants and Walmarts for that Victorian architecture they seemed to love so much. Most of the journey was dedicated to studying, and he ended up sharing a booth with Elena during their reading sessions. The historical records were the real eye-opener. Comparing texts from the 4th and 6th incursions showed the first documented cases of demon evolution. Nevscor's trading their simple scales for that compound lamellar armor they use now. And that was just the physical adaptation. Their tactics evolved exponentially faster. Most incursions featured straight-up charges until the 6th incursion just a century ago. Now, apparently, they were infiltrating humanity's civilizations. Warren mostly kept to himself during these sessions, occasionally offering context, but generally absorbed in his own documents. Elena proved more engaging company, especially when the conversation turned to experimental magic. She'd graduated top of her class at Seldor University with a thesis on regeneration magic. Apparently, aggressive regeneration, particularly from amateur healers, often led to tumors. The best healers could regenerate entire limbs without complications, but nobody really understood why less skilled attempts went wrong. Until Elena started experimenting on captured lesser fiends, deliberately manipulating healing magic in different ways to see what caused the mutations. Her story sounded about as fucked up as Cole could imagine. It was pure Unit 731 type shit. Research gained only through abominable trial and error, pushing magic in ways it was never meant to go. It was hard to feel bad about it when demons were involved. But still, there was something unsettling about how cheerfully she discussed weaponizing cancer research. Then again, he couldn't really argue with the results. And neither could Mac, who'd been patched up with that same expertise when they first arrived. Good thing she'd worked out the kinks on demons first. Between Elena's casual discussion of demon vivisection and Mac's disturbingly practical questions about using regeneration for growing new limbs, Cole was starting to wonder if this world was getting to all of them. At least they'd get to test these theories soon enough. The train was already slowing for their approach to Valoran, the last major city before the first line. They'd figured Valoran would be more military-focused than Alexandria, but damn. The whole city was basically one giant supply depot with a town attached. It was just warehouses, factories, and enough railway infrastructure to make Norfolk Southern jealous. The OTAC shuttle waiting for them at the station looked exactly like the ones back home. Well, back in Alexandria anyway. The route to the first line painted a clearer picture of what they were up against. Demon corpses littered the plain, grassy fields. Mostly low-level imps and goblins nobody bothered to clear or harvest, rotting where they fell. Seldornian cavalry ran regular patrols between a network of trenches and earthwork fortifications. He'd have thought this would be more like the Korean DMZ, but no, this was more like no man's land. Nolaran turned out to be just another cog in the machine, one of dozens of forward posts maintaining the perimeter. It adopted a star-shaped design with outer walls at least 50 feet high and a water-filled moat sourced from a nearby river. It seemed like overkill until Cole remembered the possibility of tunneling demons. The whole structure was carved with glyphs, some of them blaring red. The gate guard snapped to attention as they pulled up and exited the shuttle. "Sir, your arrival is most welcome. Your presence is required urgently." Warren glanced at the stamped metal badge on the man's chest. What's the situation, Corporal? One of our patrols is overdue, sir. No flare, he said, shaking his head. Captain Laresh requests you at operations immediately. Warren frowned, but gave a nod. Lead us to him. He turned to Cole and the others. It seems our purpose here has changed. This is no longer a mere training mission. Prepare yourselves.